story starts with a flashback. A dragon looks down at a girl and asks why she is so obsessed with gaining strength. And so, she turns her gaze with maximum concentration and says that it is for the sake of meeting her master again and finally walking beside him. The dragon relaxes and asks if it is true that this master she talks about is stronger than her, and that is exactly why she does it. She screams because it is obvious anyway, and tells the dragon that he hasn't even taught her the basics yet. Now the dragon is confused and asks what kind of master this being is, saying he definitely cannot be human. And she cuts him off on the spot and insists that he is definitely human. Then she adds a crazy detail. She says that his father is God who created the world and his mother is a spirit of nature. She imagines his silhouette against the backdrop of volcanoes and is already beginning to say his name, but just then, that scene immediately breaks off. A heavy boot steps on the ground, and there stands a man with dark hair, and someone recognizes him as the sword master Saint Alice. The girl raises her eyes to him and with full respect says that he must be the great sword Saint Takumi. Takumi looks at her completely puzzled and simply lets out a confused sound, but that's not all. He awkwardly scratches his cheek and tells her that she definitely mistook the person. He stubbornly insists that he is not some great shining great swordsman or anything like that, not from the impressive kind. And he says that he is an ordinary simple man. Long ago he retired to live alone in the mountains. The girl just laughs and waves it off, saying he is joking and his sense of humor is top level. Takumi realizes she is not listening and simply asks who she really is, which makes her pee. She apologized for not daring to introduce herself for so long as the best student of Lord Saint Alice. Following that name, Takumi laughs. He says she throws him right back to the old days and finally she lifts her gaze with a huge smile and at last truly introduces herself, Leia. Takumi laughs and says this is madness. The girl he saved just before retiring is now a sword saint. And then the realization hits him for real. He shouts in shock, "Sword Saint." And he even twitches, asking if she means that wild brat he was supposed to teach to use chopsticks 10 years ago. Leia just nods, making it clear that is exactly why he is the strongest person and master teacher of Alice. Takumi calms down a little and mumbles to himself that probably Alice then really became very strong. But he stops, suddenly realizing, if she is only second, then somewhere there is someone who stands higher. He guesses that the old rankings have hardly changed, and asks if Great Sage Narohachi is still in first place. Leia immediately shook her head and told him that Narohachi actually fell to third place. She keeps smiling and begins to name who exactly now occupies first place. Thus she declares that Takumi is the strongest in the universe, winning by a huge margin, and he looks completely dead inside. Takumi's soul almost flies out of his body and drifts away into deep space. The shock is too strong. He falls to his hands and knees on the ground, shouting that this is unbelievable, because he retired 10 years ago. He explains that back then, thanks to his team, he was kept roughly at 500th place, and since then he has done nothing. And he begins to stammer, trying to recall his tragic backstory to her, where his old party was told to his face that he was fired and his role was effectively reduced to useless, without any euphemisms. And he shouts that after he was kicked out, he completely gave up adventures and just lives alone in the mountains. Leia only smiles and waves her hand, brushing it off, because she knows about his great deeds, so he is too modest. She begins to list the crazy achievements: conquered a great dungeon and killed an ancient dragon to save the capital. She claims that his work is considered the greatest in human history, past, present, and future. Takumi looks straight at her and is overwhelmed by pure horror. He shouts that he doesn't remember any of what he did at all. Takumi trembles profusely with sweat and shouts that his only memories are hunting small animals and growing vegetables in the mountains. Leia doesn't listen at all, she only smiles and says, "It's incredible how he doesn't boast about his work and what a truly wonderful person he is." Takuma turns away completely and thinks, does she even understand a single word he says? He tries to put everything in order and asks her if people really believe that he alone did all those crazy exploits. The guild mistress corrects him. She says the Adventurers Guild records actually show that he then formed 2 people in the party along with Lady Alice. And she also says that Alice personally told her. It was actually Takami who did everything himself, like a real beast. Takumi begins to think, that girl Alice really became a holy swordswoman and smashed all those legendary quests, and now she tells people that he did all the hard work. He ponders what that means until he takes on the brilliant idea. She simply tries to repay him for taking care of her when she was still little. When the secret in his head finally comes together, he decides he will come down from the mountain later and tell the guild the real truth. Takumi looks up at the giant building before him and thinks, being number 1 in the ranking is too heavy a burden, so he turns back to the girl and asks why she really came here. Leia barely flinches and blinks. She is thrown off by the sudden question, and she explains that although Lady Alice is definitely the strongest person alive, unfortunately, she is very bad at teaching people everything. That is exactly why she rushes all the way here to beg for guidance from the great swordsman Saint Takami, the strongest in the entire universe. Tatsumi closes his eyes and tries to gently dismiss everything, explaining to Leah that Alice was by no means his apprentice in the sense she imagines. And he gives her a restrained smile, waves his hand to let go, and says that currently he really has no intention of taking any apprentices. He turns to leave and adds that in fact he is too weak to teach anyone anything, so she should just drop the idea and go home. Suddenly Takumi freezes and starts sweating profusely. He lowers his gaze and sees Leia silently drawing a small blade as if it is meant to be. She looks him straight in the eyes, and calmly says that she came here fully prepared for ritual suicide if he refuses to make her his apprentice. Pressing all her tension on him, she asks Takumi, "Please, think carefully about the situation and give her a serious answer." Takumi understands. He is completely doomed because this girl definitely won't listen to a single word, so then he surrenders immediately and says, "All right." He acknowledges her as his student. Leia asks if he is really serious. And she bursts into tears of joy, shouting a huge thank you to her new great master. And she suddenly gets too excited and throws herself at him with all her strength in a full embrace so much that she almost crushes him right on the spot. The shot cuts to the side outside the cave. Leia frantically screams and demands to know what happened to her master. Takumi wakes up in bed and shouts that he is alive. Leia apologizes, having decided that he fainted because he was exhausted from fighting an ancient dragon non-stop for a whole month. Takumi looks her straight in the eyes and forbids her from touching him ever again, mainly because he knows next time he will really die. But Leia completely misunderstood everything. She thinks his power is so great that touching him would actually be dangerous for her. She is convinced that he himself forced his body to shut down earlier only to protect her from his uncontrollable energy. And she forcefully hits her head on the floor in a deep bow and apologizes for making him go through all of this. Takumi stared at her and realized everything she just thought from beginning to end is untrue, but he understands that correcting her right now is a complete headache, so he decides to just let it go. Plus, he definitely knows if she hugs him one more time, his body really won't hold up and he will die. Then he comes up with a plan to deal with this somehow. He will give her a forged full master license and send her home. He puts on a confident expression and picks up the act, telling her that she understood everything perfectly. Next, the narrator notes, this line will become the one he uses more than anything else in his entire life. And he doesn't know it yet, but right now, if he doesn't clear up this misunderstanding, he will regret it very seriously later. Leia looks down and admits she really has no control over her own power. So she attacks at full strength every time because she simply doesn't know how to hold back. She says that Alice called him the strongest, so she was shaken. The aura feels weak, like a goblin's, as if he is hiding his true power. Leia bows to the floor and admits that she couldn't see his true strength at all. She is honestly impressed. He can hide it even more skillfully than top adventurers, and Takumi stands still and listens to her praise. He understands, even knowing this, hearing that he looks so weak and pathetic to her, it hurts deeply. Leia doesn't stop with the theory. She smiles when she says that he definitely gained that crazy ability to control his aura through truly bloody training. So she begs him teach her how to do it. Takumi starts sweating nervously, standing with his back turned because he doesn't understand at all what she means. But therefore he must, by time he tells her that it is already late and the real training will start tomorrow. For now, he only asks for help to peel some potatoes. Leia catches a potato and instantly stands straight. She looks at the vegetable as if it is a critically important mission item. And she pulls out her huge sword to clean it. She understands, this is one of those famous tricks where it looks like you're cooking, but actually it's secret training. She exclaims that she expects no less from Master Takumi. Takumi remains with his back turned and probably wonders why she is so tense, but he turns around with a quiet smile and tells her that she understood everything perfectly, although inside he knows. It's just a set of random words he picks on the fly. Takumi begins to peel his own potatoes as usual, and the narrator notes, funny, but this random routine will later become a legendary training method. Takumi suggests making rabbit stew in a pot for dinner and asks if she has any food allergies, but she says she is fine with anything. So Leia looks at the hanging meat and asks why there are only small animals like rabbits. She doesn't understand why he doesn't hunt big game like bears. Takumi sweats and tries to change the subject, asking if they will really be able to eat a whole giant monster if he manages to catch one. He thinks to himself, he definitely can't admit the truth. Fighting a bear is way too hard for him, but Leia misunderstands everything. She has a surprised expression and says that he must have a deep philosophy about not killing without need and respecting life. She adds that Alice told her everything, including that Takumi's father is a god who created the entire universe. And she insists that his mother is a great spirit who protects nature, and that his parents are true deities. She is absolutely sure of this. Tatsumi stands still and thinks that this is complete nonsense, because his father is an ordinary innkeeper and his mother is the hostess of the inn. He has no idea what Alice is trying to do to him with these crazy lies, but at this very moment. Then something crashes through the roof right between them and it becomes clear. The culinary session is over. Leia panics completely when the roof cuts in and covers them, and she shouts Takumi's name but she only needs to look at him and she is immediately impressed. She says that this is exactly what she expected from him. She notices, even when the enemy is right here, Takumi did not move an inch. And she is amazed that he holds his position, even though so much deadly intent is flying at them from all sides. She thinks that for him to be so calm is quite natural, but the real reason why he froze is simply because he is so scared that he actually wet himself a little right where he stands. Leia draws her sword on the winged girl and demands to know who she is, pointing out that she is definitely not human. The extortionist snorts and says that it is obvious. She asks, does she really look like she belongs to some lower breed? She watches them intently and introduces herself, Chloe, daughter of the Black Dragon King. And she explains that she came here specifically to meet the person who supposedly defeated the ancient dragon. Chloe climbs right into his face while he trembles all sweaty and asks if he is that Takumi. And she introduces herself Chloe, daughter of the Black Dragon King, before demanding to know if he really is the one. Leia immediately steps forward and snaps, that is clearly not her. She points out that the man sitting right there is Master Takumi. Chloe casts a glance at the trembling mess on the floor and asks if that really is him. She looks completely indifferent. Takumi just sits staring at the wall. It hurts her that there is so much disappointment in her voice, but he is so scared that he doesn't even dare to object. Leia yells at her for rudeness, explaining that Takumi is just deliberately holding back his colossal power right now. He warns the dragon girl, if he suddenly gets serious for real, he will crush her in less than a second. But the truth is that Takumi is shaking like a leaf, because he thinks he has already used all his strength just to avoid fainting. Chloe fully believes the lie and revs up to the maximum. She shouts that she wants to see this hidden power right now, so Takumi starts to panic, comes up with a pathetic excuse, and begs them to wait a bit. His dinner with the hot pot is almost ready. Chloe watches him from behind, completely bewildered. She's amazed at how he can just focus on scraping the scum off the soup pot right in the middle of all this bloody slaughter. Smiling boldly, Lee answers for him and tells the dragon girl that Master Takumi doesn't even consider her power something to worry about. Tatsumi stands there with a ladle and smiles like a pro, but in his head admits he has finally given up and just wants this to be over. He is all sweaty and only thinks about finally having a peaceful last meal, but aloud, as if nothing is wrong, he simply asks her, "How about this?" And he extends the bowl of stew as if hinting, just eat and calm down for a second. He smiles like a saint handing out a cup, but in reality it's only because he has already accepted today is the day he will die. Suddenly, from the very entrance of the cave, a terrible scream sounded. He was shouting that the food is incredibly delicious. And Chloe sits there with her cheeks stuffed to the limit, blushing and shouting that she has never tasted anything better in her life. Takumi asks if she wants more, because there is still plenty, playing the generous one thinking he is already a dead man walking, and Chloe immediately shouts that she will eat. He turns around and asks Lee if she wants more, but she politely declines. She will say so herself so as not to bother him with such a task. Tatsumi serves Lyra a bowl and says that the teacher deserves to be served food. She happily thanks him, and he remains calm only because he thinks it's the end for him. Lee takes one bite and completely loses her mind, shouting that she can't believe such an amazing hot pot really exists in this world. She starts babbling loudly with her mouth full, says that he is not only strong but also a culinary genius, and calls him the terribly almighty Superman. Takumi laughs and waves her off, tells her she is exaggerating, and to just shut up and eat quietly, but he mentally decides it doesn't matter because he is going to die soon anyway. Leia immediately apologizes for talking too much and focuses on her food again, but then Claire casts a focused look at Taku and asks if she can ask him just one question. Takumi gives her a completely relaxed smile and says he absolutely doesn't care, continuing with the logic that a dead person has nothing to worry about. She looks him straight in the eyes and asks the main question. If he is so strong, why does he go around pretending to be weak? She explains she believed from birth that strength is something to boast about, but when her grandfather lost to him, she began to doubt everything. And she says that her grandfather is an ancient dragon, a legend among dragons who had not lost a single battle in thousands of years until this happened. Chloe explains that since Takumi defeated him, her grandfather has been trembling with fear of people and turned into a recluse who lets no one in. Takumi immediately guesses that Alice is behind this mess and almost boils over. What the hell did she do to the poor dragon? Chloe continues her tirade, says she doesn't understand the point of him hiding his strength when he has so much power. She starts listing his flaws, touches on his skinny body, silly face, and says his aura is as small as a goblin's. She concludes with the words that he looks weaker than any adventure she has ever had to face, but Leia interrupts and starts scolding her for showing chopsticks. Takumi tries to smile through tears because he was so harshly roasted right in the face, and it really hits the feelings. Leia enters with a smug expression and asks the Black Lizard if she really doesn't understand what's going on here. Chloe sharply pulls back in response to the nickname utterly offended, while Takumi continues to cry in the background, but Leia completely ignores them and explains that she found out the truth about him back when she accidentally hugged Takumi that time. She insists that it was then she realized, if Takumi ever releases all the power he has been holding back, the whole world will be destroyed. Leia trembles, looks intently at him, and freezes in fear. She feels like she senses colossal power. Meanwhile, Takumi panics inside and wonders what kind of power she is talking about. She begins to tell her own backstory to prove her point, saying that since childhood she mastered every secret technique her clan could offer. She tells them, after all those harsh trainings, she mastered a technique that allows her to endure literally any kind of physical pain possible. Then she blushes so much she shakes. She admits that from the moment she touched Takumi, her heart cannot calm down and she gets hot just from the memory. She insists that even the tiniest touch leaked enough power to almost destroy her body essentially. She confused a huge heartbeat with a deadly beam. Chloe mockingly calls it a terrible power, and Takumi just sits and tells her that it sounds much more like a serious illness, but Leia ignores him and scolds the dragon, stating that Takumi restrains himself only because they are weak, and that his tears are actually tears of sympathy for them. In Takumi's head, he shouts that she is completely wrong, but he understands. If he doesn't give them a proper answer now, it seems he is dead meat. So he instantly changes his tone, puts on a smug face, and tells Leia that she figured it out perfectly, as if that was the plan from the very beginning. He manages to act, but inside he is sobbing and thinking what a strange fool he must be just to survive this. Takumi is all sweaty and crying, not believing himself. Did his grandfather, when fighting dragons, feel the same pathetic helplessness? Chloe looks at him intently, but she starts shaking and admits to herself that she cannot find any way to really defeat him so she throws herself into the sky, tearing the air with a scream. She definitely has not won this fight yet. After that, a crazy rumor begins to spread everywhere, that he knocked down the black dragon without even touching it. But before leaving, Chloe looks back, points to him on the right, and shouts that she will definitely return for a rematch. She disappears into the sky, and Takumi just watches her go, praying that she never appears again. Inside, Leia pushes him out of the kitchen and insists that she will handle the cleaning so he can go rest. It is completely dark now, so Takumi tells her that they need to go back home. Mountain roads are dangerous at night. They silently look at each other, complete misunderstanding. He asks if she is not leaving, and she freezes with surprise. How can he even ask such a thing? She blushes and tells him that Eli's taught her. A student must live with their master constantly until their training is complete. Lee throws a bomb at him in an absolutely serious tone. She says she intends to live right here with him. But Takumi immediately panics. He starts shouting no no no, insisting that he definitely cannot do such a thing with a girl her age. He tries to put him in his place, telling her to just go home for today and come back tomorrow. And he suddenly remembers how earlier she talked about heartbeat, so he suggests escorting her home and stopping by the clinic to have her examined. Lee instantly turns away, pouts, and says she hates that idea, so she categorically refuses to go. But she insists that his power causes strange anomalies in her body that she has never felt in her entire life. Takumi stands still with a stone face and thinks that this definitely has nothing to do with him, but Lee is glowing with embarrassment and says that the tight, painful feeling in her chest makes her think, as if the power is rising in waves and she is about to become stronger. Takumi just looks at the literal mushroom-shaped cloud. She is chilled by the thought that the power bursting out means she is about to spontaneously explode, so he tries again to convince her, flicks his finger, and insists that he cannot allow an unmarried girl to live with such an old man like him. Takumi nervously looks into her eyes and commands, "Enough, put away that dagger and stop trying to cut your stomach right now." Lee holds the blade at the ready and stubbornly says that she has dedicated her whole life to the sword, so such nonsense as the difference between sexes does not bother her at all. Takumi understands that this is too much trouble already, so he gives in and says, "All right, let her live here, just stop trying to commit ritual suicide." Lyde's face instantly lights up, and she thanks him with a huge smile. She almost lunged at him but suddenly froze mid-move. Apologizing for being so happy, she almost broke the rule about touching him. Takumi keeps calm on the outside. He simply tells her to be more careful next time. And he watches as she happily, a bit nervously, jumps away, constantly asking her not to destroy his home while she settles in. Lee stands blushing to tears and whispers that Takumi is truly terrifying. His power flowed into her again, even without them touching. She clutches her chest, completely stunned, and says that her heart is beating so wildly fast, as if it is about to burst from the energy. Takumi tries to sound like a wise mentor. He reads her a lesson, saying that if she cannot handle even this tiny bit of power, then she has no future as a warrior. She starts to panic again, flusteredly apologizing for ruining everything, as if it is the end of the world. But Takumi is already completely tired of this drama, so he sits down and decides, let them just rest today. He points with his finger across the room, clearly indicating to her where her territory is and where his is. Leia looks quite depressed because of the distance and asks if she can sleep right next to him. She suddenly falters, covers her mouth with her palm as if she just realized something huge, and she says that if she lies next to him, she won't be able to withstand his strength and will actually break. She smiles as if she just solved a riddle and asks him if this is the real reason why he separated them like that. Yes, Takumi keeps a stone face and tells her that he figured everything out perfectly, thereby confirming she is absolutely right. And he lies down thinking that the truth is that he himself will be the first to break, because he is terribly nervous. And he admits to himself, he cannot sleep next to a girl because his experience with women is zero. Leia does not sleep in the dark and whispers that just living together in the same house is too stressful and her face instantly turns completely red when she admits to herself that she cannot handle this. Morning comes and Takumi wakes up with a huge yawn, but Leia is already on her feet meeting him immediately. Takumi looks around and sees that she is sitting by the entrance with a knife, and nervously asks what exactly is happening. She points to a huge bucket of peeled potatoes and says that she was too excited to sleep, so she started training at dawn. Takumi finally loses his temper. If she keeps peeling food like this, they will starve even before the winter cold ends. He immediately sets a new rule to save his supplies and sternly tells her she can peel only one potato a day. Leia looks disheveled and asks how this can count as training, then suddenly stops complaining as if overwhelmed by a heavy realization. She sharply turns around and smiles with full force, confident that figuring out what to do with her free time is the training he meant. Takumi breaks out in sweat but just does pull-ups and takes the hit. The guy lies to her face, says she perfectly understood his plan. Takumi looks at the bucket of potato peels and moans with pure regret that it is such a waste. He decides that later they will crush them to make potato soup. A hand gripping a sword is shown, but Takumi ignores everything, crawls on the floor, rummages and picks up crumbs, grumbling that now he can't waste food because expenses have increased. Suddenly Leia shouts, "You bastard scoundrel, what do you think you are doing?" Her voice trembles with rage and when she threw the sword forward at a crazy speed, the blade grazed past Takumi's face before he could blink. Takumi freezes, convinced that she finally got tired of him with his miserable stingy master who scraps potato ends. And he begins to sweat profusely, thinking about how he has repeatedly sent premonitions of death about 100 times a day as long as he lives with her. But then from the side, as if in passing, a polite voice sounded, "Good morning, Takumi Dono," and Takumi, confused, turns his head. It turns out Leia has targeted the alien. She yells at him for daring to return immediately after Takumi showed him mercy. She decides that enough talking is enough, so she shouts to Takumi, "It's time to finish off this bastard once and for all." Takumi panics and orders Leia to calm down. The sword is literally just a few inches from his nose, and he is nearly dying of fear. But he still manages to say that it seems this very invader did not come to fight. Chloe agrees immediately and addresses him politely, "Takumi Dono." She explains that she actually made the whole journey just to report to him, so she falls to one knee and drops a huge bomb on him. She proclaims that the entire Dragon clan has officially decided to become loyal subjects of Takumi. Takumi stands, all sweaty and confused, while Chloe continues announcing that from this moment on they want him to lead them all as the new Dragon King. Leia watches how everything unfolds and begins piecing together the evidence in her head. She realizes her master has already raised the strongest disciple in the world, and he simply took an even stronger grand disciple as a student. But apparently, even that was not enough for him because now he literally becomes the king of the dragon tribe, and that's on top of everything else. Her delusion that he is a god flies into the sky. Meanwhile, Takumi looks as if his soul is about to leave his body. He sees his dreams of a peaceful, boring life are loudly shattering into pieces right before him. And so, with an unwilling leader and a force that was not understood, a true legend finally begins, but somewhere completely else. In the shadows lurks a mysterious armored silhouette, whispering the name Takami, a hint that his troubles are definitely not over yet. The scene shifts to the past. A knight fully clad in armor stands over Takumi and lowers his hammer. He says that from today he is officially expelled from the party. Today, Takami's face pales and breaks into sweat as the news hits him, and he can barely manage to mutter a confused question: why is this happening? Because he honestly did not think it would end like this. His face suddenly goes completely cold from shock. But deep down he admits to himself, he always knew the truth. He was just a burden to the other members all this time. And he truly considers it a miracle that they even allowed a talentless guy like him to stay in the party for so long. We cast a brief glance at the squad he leaves behind. Rick the warrior stands upright, and next to him Batsu the thief. And then Sasha the priestess, who looks very worried about the situation. But the main heavy artillery of the whole group is This mysterious woman stands with her back turned, and from her emanates such an oppressive aura that everyone immediately understands. She is the leader here. Takumi accepts his fate without resistance and says he understands. He says he will gather his things tonight and leave. But the girl screams right in his face without any restraint. She tells him a categorical no and orders him to get out right now, this very second. Takumi tries to be pleasant one last time. He asks if he can at least prepare the last meal for everyone before he leaves. But Sasha completely breaks character, starts drooling and says that it actually sounds very good so. The armored girl instantly stops him, shouts in his face, "Get out immediately right now." Takumi does not resist, just thanks them for everything they have done for him up to this moment. And he goes into the darkness, looks back one last time, asks them, "Please take care of Alice." As he leaves, a memory flashes for a moment. A hand gently pats the girl on the head, a small act of kindness. But suddenly Rick sharply calls to stop. He tells Takumi to leave the collar behind, it belongs to the old Haku. Takumi says he understands. He reaches for his neck and immediately starts to unfasten the clasp, but a crazy light explodes immediately as soon as he touches it. Rick realizes the old witch was listening, it's a teleport trap. Magic wildly bursts around them and Rick panics. He shouts that she is actually coming back right now. The party instantly bursts into battle against the looming threat, and Rick launches a powerful kick so that Takumi flies away, while someone shouts that they are buying time. Rick still holds the mask, shouts at Takumi and asks what he is doing and demands that he get out of there as quickly as possible. Sasha also joins in shouting that he needs to leave immediately, because he, supposedly, is not capable of being an adventurer anyway. Takumi was thrown into the air by the force of the kick, but as soon as he was carried away, he suddenly got stuck. What the hell just happened? He realizes the whole situation was spoiled from the start. Their harsh words sounded completely robotic, as if they were just reading bad lines from a sheet. Finally, it dawns on him they were putting on a show, and he tries to understand what they really wanted to achieve. Understanding hits him unexpectedly. He looks back at his friends, and those memories of their cruel words suddenly take on a completely different meaning. He remembers how Rick told the old witch that he expelled Takumi by his own authority, essentially begging her to let the boy go free. Then he recalls how Sasha begged her, explaining that Takumi was already at the limit of his physical strength, and her treatment would not be enough to keep him alive. And finally Batsu, who called him the weakest boy in history, just to convince the old woman that Takumi was not worth keeping in their elite team. The witch lady flies into the frame and throws a look full of rage. She declares that she will not allow this and says, Takumi belongs to Naruhachi and will live with them forever. She warns the travelers not to stand in their way. The three of them cannot defeat Naruhachi, and Takumi just stands and watches, wiping tears from his eyes. Then he completely loses his mind. His friends are actually risking their own lives to protect him from this monster. Flying back through the air, he remembers their harsh words about how the party would be fine without him, but now he knows. Even when they called him a dead weight, they were just trying to save him, and he crashes hard into the ground. He bursts forward and stops abruptly, gritting his teeth and telling himself that this whole vile trick is definitely just a trap to let him break free. The witch lady mocks the party and says that they judge strength only by what is on the surface. So what could they possibly know about the real Takumi? She asks if they have ever stopped and thought why Alice, who has all that crazy power, was so obsessed with hanging out with Takumi. Then she suddenly points at Rick. He whispers an order to Takami to run while they buy time. Sasha quietly adds that his cooking was always incredibly delicious. And they They both turn sharply and shout at the top of their lungs, ordering him to just get out of there and not look back. The witch lady realizes he's gone and looks completely confused, asking exactly where Takami disappeared to. Rick points into the distance and lies that Takumi ran away because Naruhachi was bullying him. Sasha picks up that it's all the fault of that monster and they have to put an end to the old grudge. She panics completely as she reaches forward and starts babbling, begging them to wait. She tries to say something about Alice, but she starts winding herself up, insisting that Naruhachi is not bad, and desperately tries to hold back tears. It doesn't work at all. She breaks down right here and bursts into tears like a giant child. Takumi doesn't waste a second on distraction. He shouts thank you to his friends and runs without stopping, saving his life. The witch lady jerks sharply and jumps forward with a wild look, screaming his name. And she swears that it doesn't matter where he tries to hide. She will definitely find him no matter the cost. The story jumps abruptly forward to our time, a quiet panorama of mountains, where here Takumi returned to his usual routine, sitting by the fire and cooking food while Chloe and Lee wait for him to finish. Chloe begins to explain the dragon hierarchy and says that each race has its own king, and her grandfather, an ancient dragon, once ruled over all of them, standing at the very top. She explains her grandfather actually retired after a fight with Takumi, so her father took over in the meantime. And Takumi casually, somewhere in the background, is scrambling eggs. Chloe keeps repeating, Her dad knew that Takumi defeated her grandfather with ruthless force, so he made a crazy decision about Takumi. And he really started telling everyone that he wants to pass the title of Dragon King directly to him. Lee doesn't listen to a single word of the history lesson. She only praises Takumi's divine timing with salt and eggs as if it's a real miracle. At that moment she is just drooling and says she can't hold back anymore because she needs to eat right now, but Takumi stops her with one overly serious face saying it's not ready yet, and that she'll have to wait a little longer. He insists that she needs to be patient until the egg is perfectly soft-boiled, and treats this soup as if life depends on it. Chloe ignores conversations about cooking and admits she was categorically against her father giving the throne to some person she had never met, so she decided to come for Takumi herself to check if he was really worthy. And it's funny, because right now he is just stressed about the eggs. Chloe gets annoyed and asks if anyone is even listening to her. She stands nearby while Takumi cooks and Leia laughs and admits she wasn't listening at all, calls her a black lizard, says now is not the time, so yes, and Chloe yells that she came to report to him. Although Takumi says he heard her, she screams even louder, "You are not listening." When he listens, Takumi cuts the drama. He says the food is finally ready and orders them to be quiet so they can have breakfast. Leia doesn't wait for permission and immediately takes a bite. She makes a joyful sound while eating. Her eyes light up, she blushes and stammers, telling Takumi that the soup is simply incredibly tasty. And she completely immerses herself in the taste, insists that the egg melts in the mouth, that it's just soup, and she is already losing it. Chloe ignores the food and becomes serious again, explaining, for dragons, the rule of the strong prevails. And she says that even when he had the power to crush her grandfather, he did not boast about it at all. She concludes by saying that seeing Takumi live so modestly, that is exactly what showed her the future of the dragon clan. Chloe suddenly kneels down and begins to beg him to take the place instead of him, to become the king of the dragon tribe and lead them. Takumi looks as if everything inside him has already died and thinks, this sounds not like an honor but like a direct nightmare. He is all wet with fear and panics inside, insists that it is impossible and that he hates it, tries to figure out how to refuse without dying. And Leia interrupts the conversation with such a self-satisfied expression on her face and tells the black lizard to calm down for a minute. She is in control. She smiles and explains, Takumi never technically said he would not become king, he just remains silent about it. Chloe's face lights up. She asks if this is really true, and in the background frame Takumi is just going crazy and shouting no 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 again and again. Leia ignores him and tells Chloe not to rush, saying he just means that the time has not yet come, so Takumi remains completely confused. Chloe goes into hard mode and interrogates, what does she mean by this and when exactly, more precisely, is this supposed to happen? So Leia answers immediately, saying that everything here is extremely obvious, as if she had outlined this plan from the very beginning. She declares that it will happen when they conquer every species in the world and prepare the highest throne place for it, and Takumi just stands there nervously laughing. Leia repeatedly speaks for him, and insists that Takumi will not be satisfied with something as trivial as being the king of the dragon tribe. And she turns to him with a huge innocent smile and asks him to support these words. Treatment? Takumi completely surrenders his position, shouts that he does not understand what he is really thinking about. Chloe sounds confused by the sudden outburst and asks outside if this means her guess was wrong. Takumi dots the I's, says he will not move from this place, and he does not care about the perfect king. He smiles and tells Chloe that he regrets it, but not because he already has everything he wants here. And he says that this mountain already gives him absolutely everything a person really needs to survive. He slides the bowl closer and orders her to eat, repeating that life is only sun, earth, and food. Chloe takes one bite and it feels like she is melting. A strange sound bursts out. The taste is so all-consuming that. And she feels warmth wrapping her body, while Leia boldly asks if the black lizard finally understood it. Chloe finally gives up and admits, the title King of the Dragon Tribe is simply an unnecessary burden for him. And she adds that they have already decided, he is their master, so they will not force him to actually lead them. And she will beg him at least to keep it in the corner of his consciousness. Now the dragon tribe is under his command. Takumi sighs and says he will think about it, and now he is stuck with a whole army on top of the apprentice. He begins to cry comic tears and wonder why his quiet life suddenly turned into pure misfortune. But he suddenly comes to his senses and asks how Lee and Chloe even found his house, because he stops and comes to the thought, he hasn't told a single living soul where exactly he is hiding. Leia happily explains, Alice can see exactly what he is doing, you just have to close your eyes and think about him. And Takumi completely loses it, because that stalker with magical remote viewing is just terrifying. For a moment he tries to brush off this horror and turns back to Chloe, asking how the hell she even found this place. Chloe says she just went to the Adventurers Guild and asked where exactly the #1 ranker hangs out, and Takumi immediately breaks out in sweat, asking if the guild really just gave away his location like that. She says no, they refuse to tell her anything even if they knew. And they also behave arrogantly as if everything is allowed to them. Takumi touches his chest and exhales a huge relieved breath, glad that the system finally worked, but when Chloe says it was a pure coincidence, at that very moment someone in the guild was also looking for him. She says that person happened to be holding one of his personal belongings, and she raises a small bell, says she took it from them, and then simply followed the scent and found it. Takumi sees the bell and his soul almost leaves his body. He knows exactly who this thing belongs to. He gets worked up and yells at KHLO, take this thing and come back home immediately. And he yells at her to throw that bell far away before it's too late. KHLO is completely confused by his panic and asks why he suddenly behaves so strangely. And the bell activates, immediately bursting with a huge surge of magic, and Takumi falls to the floor and covers his head. A voice sounds from the light calling Takumi's name, sounding quite serious, and the person says, these last 10 years of waiting felt much longer than 1,000 years of life. Leia completely covers her eyes from the dazzling glare, utterly stunned, because she suddenly realizes she definitely knows who just appeared. This is the former #1 Fury and Elf Mage with an immortal body, who just emerged from the light, and the text introduces her as the great sage Nirohachi. Now she looks very, very frightening. She identifies Leia as Alice's apprentice and KHLO as the dragon's granddaughter, while Takumi the Shy hides behind them. Nirohachi looks at the girls and asks Takumi if these are his current friends with whom he now hangs out. And Leia immediately turns serious. She looks at her intently and asks what exactly her goal is, why she came here. Nirohachi smiles and tells him that she has already said this. She will never leave Takumi again. And Leia turns around completely confused and asks what exactly that is supposed to mean. The great sage just continues to smile boldly and says that it means exactly what it sounds like. And she clearly says it out loud. It means that she will be by Takumi's side anytime and anywhere. Leia completely loses her mind. She trembles, babbles about privacy in the bathroom, and shouts where she intends to sleep. And Nirohachi just hugs herself, blushes, and says that, of course, they will do all of this together. This is the last straw for Leia. She instantly draws her sword and asks Takumi if she can just cut down this huge sage right now. Nirohachi does not flinch, even once looks creepy, and when she says that trying to chop her down sounds interesting. And then, as if out of nowhere, Chloe interrupts the conversation and points out the problem. Living in this tiny cave with 4 people will be too cramped. Takumi and Leia sharply turn around and shout at the dragon girl. What does she even mean? Chloe turns to Leia and asks if she plans to stay here forever, then casually drops another bomb. Takumi will be the Dragon King. She makes a small heart sign with her hands and adds that it has to be this way. She and Takumi must get married immediately. So Nirohachi just laughs at all this and says she doesn't care how many wives got involved in this quarrel. Chloe looks delighted because finally someone understands when she mentions it. She heard about the great sage from her grandfather and is already ready to unite. Takumi is completely panicked inside because these sudden events with the harem are too much pressure for a guy like him, a virgin. Leia decides the conversation is over, grabs a blade to kill everyone and forces Takumi to panic and rush to stop her. Suddenly, everything gets serious. Takumi utters the name Nirohachi and she turns around to give him her full attention. He puts on a serious face and tells her directly that she needs to leave. He can't allow her to stay with him because he says he has no master, yet she once taught him the basics of traveling. Takumi smiles and tells her, despite their past, he only wants one thing: to live quietly and peacefully in these mountains. Tatsumi feels quite confident. Since she and Nirohachi have known each other for so long, she definitely understands where he is coming from. Nirohachi just lets out a quiet, slightly amused sound, and she starts cracking her fingers with a creepy smile on her face, and asks Takumi if he really intends to go against her right now. Takumi completely freezes, realizing that she hasn't caught his thoughts at all. It seems to her as if he is trying to start a fight. Leia rushes in to praise him for his firm words, and adds, if he agreed to leave the witch, she was fully ready to kill everyone including herself. So Takumi looks exhausted and begs her to be quiet. He just wants her to stop making this situation even more complicated than it already is. But suddenly Nirohachi releases a huge dark aura, asking Takumi if he is sure about this, because he definitely knows what happens to those who oppose her. The man trembles uncontrollably with fear, thinking, everything is bad, I'm about to solemnly wet my pants. But Lee suddenly reaches out to stop him, ordering him to wait 1 second because she steps in front of him. She says she understands. He is trembling with the excitement of battle, but wants him to let her handle it this time. Takumi realizes that Lei, in her own way, even if well-intentioned, has misinterpreted the situation, but it unnerves him greatly because she steps right up to the witch and declares that Takumi's apprentice will become her rival. Nirohachi is very interested that Leia is studying under Alice and Takumi, so she agrees to take her with her. While this is happening, Takumi looks back and sees Chloe doing squats nearby, so he asks what the hell she is doing. Chloe says that she is just preparing to fight whoever wins this match, and this completely confuses Takumi. Then she asks if this is some kind of battle reel variant where the survivors fight, but Takumi immediately shouts that she is wrong. He turns back to the main fight and shouts that killing each other is forbidden, begging them to keep everything as a safe sparring. Leia completely ignores him and fixes her position, and announces that she is going on the attack. Chloe watches from the side and suddenly panics. She realizes that the girl is actually using a technique called God Possession. Nuruhachi smiles wildly and says that she heard. Leia fights by allowing a god to possess her body, and now she can finally go full speed. Leia raises her gaze, looks crazy, ready to split the witch in half, but Takumi interrupts the conversation and tells Nuruhachi that enough stops the fight right here. Nuruhachi looked and asked if he was interrupting to kiss her for the victory or something like that. He ignores the joke and says that they cannot be together forever, but she can visit anytime. He promises to wear the bell like before, so he begs her, just come back home for today. She smiles and says that nothing can be done. She will make an exception for this as a favor. But before leaving, she tells him that she has one single specific warning for him. And she notes that Leia's power is similar to Alice's power, but it won't last long. Takumi says he knows that. She already begins to comment on his character, but stops and simply lets go of the thought and leaves. She orders Chloe to carry her home, although the dragon girl says she wants to stay with Takumi. The dragon girl bursts into the sky, they pull her away, and she yells at the witch not to touch her horns because they are very sensitive. And as soon as they disappear, Takumi turns around to check if Leia is okay. She only groans in response, but suddenly she grabs him and crashes into him with freezing hugs. You can hear bones cracking as he screams, begging for his life. She breaks down in tears and apologizes to him, completely ignoring that her behavior is already crippling his body. And he finally manages to say, "It's okay," trying to stay cool although he is clearly in pain. And he raises his broken, loose, crooked forearm and tells her not to worry. This witch is a great sage, so beating her is impossible anyway. But Leia cannot accept comfort. She is shaking with anger, and she admits that she was simply too immature then. She explains that during the fight she allowed the neuroshatrash talk to get into her head and confuse her. But Takumi listens while the witch pulls out the past, which she hasn't even told her mistress Alice about yet. Takumi's face instantly becomes completely blank. He understands, this is a lead-in to a flashback and it will drag on for a long time. Takumi looks too serious, but in reality he is panicking about the rice harvest. He needs to finish this conversation quickly. And Leia raises her eyes to him, tears welling up, and is about to start her emotional story, but suddenly Takumi interrupts her confident posture and says she doesn't need to say a word because he already understands everything. Leia sharply inhales, not believing what she heard. She is convinced he read her entire tragic past just by looking into her eyes. So Takumi plays perfectly. He picks up his agricultural hoe and confirms that everything was exactly like that. He turns to leave, secretly rejoicing that he bought time. He definitely didn't want to get stuck listening to a heavy trauma dump. While they walk along the path to the mountains, Leia seriously asks him what exactly she needs to do to finally break out of this passage. And Takumi just throws out some lazy advice and asks why she can't just stop worrying about it. He adds that when you are in nature, even the past starts to seem tiny and insignificant, and tries to sound profound. But Leia completely misunderstood everything. She is shocked that he can call her trauma quiet even after learning the truth. Takumi nervously invents some nonsense about how the wind blows away the past. He is completely improvising and Leia looks up at him as if he were a genius, but it is precisely this way of looking that makes Takumi remember the past. He begins to recall how he first found Alice as a child and tried with all his might to raise her properly. And he knew, since he was the weakest among everyone, keeping up with her meant dragging everyone else down. He admits to himself, the real reason he gave up on adventures back then was not to run away from Nuruhachi. It was only because he was too weak to continue standing beside Alice without feeling like a burden. So he recalls the harsh words Nuruhachi said to him, assuring that the resemblance to Alice would not last long. He thinks again about training his body to get back in shape. Maybe he can manage it. And after 10 years of retirement, his weak body has only deteriorated further. Now even a goblin would probably easily crush him. He decides to just play by the rules of this masterful trick until Leia is satisfied, and then finally decides to leave. Takumi realizes he doesn't even need to teach her anything. Leia will become stronger on her own anyway. So he decides, at least for now, since it has come to this, he will keep the role and behave like a decent master with her. Leia laughed heartily and says that next time she will definitely win all, because she had so many chances to hug him. She clenches her fists and says that now she feels much stronger inside than when she activated God mode. Takumi is nervous seeing how she is getting so worked up. He tells her to calm down and take everything slowly for now. He says that Nuruhachi will most likely keep appearing, so he advises her to fight with less strength next time. Leia shouted back yes. so loudly it could have drowned out the silence of the nearby fields, and her voice rang over them, giving a command of confirmation. But as soon as the moment passes, Takumi frowns irritably and starts thinking about Nihiru again. And he realizes, she probably visits every day, but inside he prays that she would give him a break and appear once a week. Meanwhile, the witch lady raises her eyes and smiles boldly, asking if Alice has finally appeared. Nihiru's face takes on a very dark expression, and she declares that she will get rid of anyone who tries to get close to Takumi. She stares directly at that girl and says that she has a very tense expression on her face right now. But Nihiru smiles and frankly admits she is making exactly the same grimace herself. The girl covers her mouth as if caught off guard and admits, yes, Nihiru might actually be right. Suddenly, a memory surfaces. They were still children, and exactly that moment when Takumi bought a sword for little Nihiru. And we learned that in the end, Alice did hold the weapon that Takumi left back then, many years ago. And here is the wonder. Everyone calls her Sword Saint, but in reality Alice does not know how to fight with a sword at all, and she simply takes and delivers blows to people, that's all. But her punch is stronger than any other attack in the whole world. Since magic does not work on Alice, Nihiru realizes she is forced to keep all her magic inside herself to enhance her physical abilities. She takes a fighting stance and says she is going for her beauty, as if finally the time has come to settle the score. Nihiru does not hold back and bursts into battle, and Alice immediately launches a colossal attack right at her. Nihiru shouts that she will fight head-on without any tricks, just an honest, straightforward fight. Then she decides not to dodge at all and puts all her strength into this one moment, to the last drop. Alice's fist bites into Nihiru's face. It is a brutal blow that makes the whole room tremble. The blow throws Nihiru back, and she crashes with her body into the stone wall of this room deep inside. She jumps up and slides down in shock. The hit was insane. Her entire magic collection instantly disappeared, scattering away. Knocked down and sweaty, she glances at Alice and asks if she will finish the work right now, but when Alice says no, she just needed to make sure that Nihiru wouldn't be able to go to Tatsuki for some time. She clenches her fist and says, this is enough for her. She expressed her opinion loudly and clearly, and Nihiru admits that she is right. Her magic is already completely exhausted, so she can't even teleport from there. Nihiru looks at the castle and decides, that's enough. She plans to just pretend to be dead until she recovers a bit. But she has one burning question. She raises her eyes and asks Alice, why did she even send Leia to Takumi? And since Alice doesn't really explain this, Nihiru understands. There is no choice, she will have to use magic right here and read Alice's thoughts. As soon as she presses enter, she is overwhelmed by a complete breakdown. She can't believe how incredibly strong the emotions she feels through Alice are. She is shocked. How can a person hold so many emotions and still maintain such a calm demeanor? But then she sees the truth. Nihiru realizes Alice has lived her whole life only for Takumi, but that's not even the most chaotic. Because she also sees what Alice truly believes. Takumi is much stronger than her. For her, this is simply an undeniable fact. Nekrakachi cries quietly a little and admits that now she is beginning to understand where this comes from in Alice. So, while Alyssa walks away, Nihiru ponders. Everyone is born with different capacities, as if each has their own vessel for the soul. And some have giant containers capable of holding anything, from vast fortunes to entire kingdoms or even the whole world. Nihiru stares at the overflowing cup and realizes, even people with huge souls cannot handle ones like hers or Alyssa's. And she admits to herself, only Takumi can clean up their mess, only he can endure it. She remembers the time when Takumi smiled at her like an idiot and asked if this training would finally make him strong. So she had to yell at him to stop immediately, warning that he would literally die if he continued. Returning to the present, Nihiru sharply comes to her senses. She tells Alyssa not to look down on her because she is not just anyone. And she declares that her real name is Chilt, the great sage and head of her clan, straightening all her titles and activating her power. She shouts that Takumi belongs to her people and will not give him to anyone, but that's all because, in the middle of the phrase, she is instantly crushed by a huge blow to the stomach and immediately falls silent. Meanwhile, Leia completely misunderstands the situation and thinks milk is needed, so she readily volunteers to run and buy it. Takumi looks nervous and quickly shuts it down, telling her he will go himself and she must stay behind to guard the house. Leia does not let him go, insisting that she cannot burden him with all sorts of black work, so she prepares to summon the god of speed to dash there instantly. Tatsumi gets angry and wildly waves his hands, shouting at her to go normally without any weird powers. He grabs a pen to quickly make a list and orders her, buy 2 liters of milk and use the rest of the change to purchase a cheap sword and shield. Leia cheers and screams that she will risk her life on this first outing, but Tatsumi orders her to calm down. Dying is not part of the mission. He watches the road and thinks, since it leads straight to the city, she will return by noon, so he decides to trust her this time. Later, Leia comes in and says she is home. She carries a huge live cow on her back, holding Alice's hand with one hand, and Tatsumi just stands silently, wondering how it all came to this. He looks at her smiling face, trying to understand why he ordered her to get milk, and how she decided to bring back not just milk, but the whole animal. Then he examines her gear and notices a sword that looks too expensive for the budget he gave her. And he starts to panic because the weapon radiates an incredibly evil aura that screams, trouble. But that's not the end yet. He notices something else and freezes in place as if he was switched off. Tatsumi looks around at the giant object on her back and starts sweating, asking if that is called a shield, and if it is supposed to be like that at all. Leia smiles as if everything is fine and confirms, no, that is definitely not some kind of shield. Takumi falls to the ground in complete defeat, and doesn't understand how a regular milk run turned into such a mess. And he looks at the little elf girl standing nearby and asks her name. She touches her chin with a finger, and says her name is Chiharu. He repeats the name to double-check, and she happily clasps her hands together and confirms, yes, she is Chiharu. Leia says the child was found in the city with memory gaps, so no one has the slightest idea who her parents are or where she came from. But the boy called Leia's name as she was passing by, so Leia decided there was some connection between them and took her in. Takumi looks at the girl and starts to panic. He asks Leia if she really doesn't recognize who this child really is. Leia says this must be their first meeting, yet admits, for some reason she feels like she has seen this girl somewhere before. Then the boy points his finger right at his face and shouts his name, proving that she definitely knows who he is. Takumi turns to the mysterious boy, who is sweating a little, and asks if he thinks she really knows who he is. And Chiharu throws her hands up, chirps happily that she definitely knows him and knows Leia too. So Leia gulps loudly, her eyes wide open. A crazy idea flashes in her mind. She sharply turns to Takami and starts asking if this child could really be their daughter who returned from the future. Leia blushes, and Chiharu just stands nearby with a self-satisfied smile. Then scatter the spiral into massive nonsense babble about how the timeline is formed, and that this very child must be here to change the future, full of despair, where the two of them are already a married couple. Takumi immediately covers Chiharu's eyes and says that decent children should not look at a crazy lady right now. He decides to completely ignore Leia's breakdown and declares that he will just take the milking bucket and cook potato soup. But he pauses, sitting next to the animal, and asks Leia why she brought a whole live cow home instead of just buying a carton of milk. Leia explains that she did go for milk, but the ranch was attacked by goblins. She slaughtered them, and the farmers, grateful, gave her the entire cow. Takumi nods and tells her she's great, imagining that she beat a few weaklings with an ordinary stick, completely underestimating what she actually did. Leia laughs loudly, and in a flashback the real picture is shown. She didn't fight just a few guys, she completely destroyed a huge army of goblins. And she proudly declares, after she, as his student, defeated hundreds of enemies, the credit essentially belongs to him. Takumi jokes with laughter, still quite sure she fought only 2 or 3 weaklings, and that she is just exaggerating the whole story. He doesn't let the hero finish speaking and immediately serves dinner, a luxurious bowl of cold, coarsely ground potato soup. And he smiles at the little elf girl and says she doesn't need to hurry. He prepared a huge portion, and there will be enough extra as well. Chiharu truly enjoys it. She stuffs the food into her mouth and exclaims that the potato here does all the hard work. Leia also looks impressed. She almost cries because of the texture and praises how the creamy soup still feels like eating real potatoes. And she looks at the 3 of them sitting together by the fire and happily says that now they really look like a family. But as soon as she suddenly falls back into a trance and whispers that this homely atmosphere proves Chiharu is their child from the future. So Takumi says that 2 people cannot make an elf baby, but Chiharu just beams and declares that it's okay. She will just call mom and dad. Leia smugly says that Chiharu has fully accepted the family dynamic, but Takumi shouts that he does not accept all this. He is shaking, he is still a virgin, but somehow he is being forced to take a wife and have a child. Then in despair he shifts the conversation to the sword that Leia bought earlier. He says it looks expensive and asks if she even had enough money for it. Leia says the price was actually very low. Apparently, no one could master this particular sword for many years, and it was just carried off to this remote wilderness. So Takumi asks what she means by mastery, and she casually reveals the weapon's name is Demon Sword Soul Eater. Takumi starts sweating with fear as he explains. This sword drains the strength of whoever holds it, and it is said to literally devour their soul. Taku stares fixedly at one point, and horror immediately overwhelms him. His intuition did not fail. He has come face to face with a cursed katana. Leia admits it is not as impressive as Takumi Calibur's holy sword, which she supposedly gave to Alice, but she still thinks it is quite a decent blade. Takumi completely ignores the compliment and sharply jerks his head back, shouting what the hell Takumi Calibur is supposed to mean and what it is for. And it turned out the sword that Nuru Hache once bought for him and then left to Alisa was renamed after he left. Now it is known by the ridiculous title Excalibur Mass Immune Takuma Caliber. Takumi thinks about how his old cheap weapon somehow grew to the status of one of the three holy swords of the world. But he needs to focus on what is happening now. He pulls out the Soul Leader sword and asks Leia if she really tried to use it herself. Then she falls to the floor and admits. She tested it in the store, but it instantly sucked the strength out of her and she almost felt sick right there. Takumi immediately tells her that it is too dangerous and orders her to return it immediately, but Leia waves it off with a smile, insisting that if Takumi wields it, he will definitely handle the curse. Later that same evening, Chiharu calls him, so Takumi casually asks if she is already starting to get sleepy. And she tells him that a whole bunch of things have arrived, and it turns out the whole house is surrounded by monsters. A large crowd of angry goblins is gathering at their place, staring intently and unblinkingly without any mercy. Leia panics and shouts his name while Takumi realizes with horror they have been tracked all the way to the house. So he tells Leia this is her mess to fix and orders her to take care of it, and she only apologizes for the inconvenience. Lee throws a bomb. She says the magic sword in the shop drank all her energy so she cannot fight. And Takumi realizes he is completely doomed. Outside the hut, the situation worsens. The rumble of the goblin army roars louder and approaches. Takumi forces himself to look calm, orders Leia to watch carefully, and she gladly hands him the cursed weapon. He firmly takes a position and gives her the last order. If he dies, let her grab Chiharu and run away from here. But as soon as he grabs the handle, his face twists in shock. Something is definitely wrong here. And he begins to panic and shouts that his power is actually being sucked out of his body by this weapon. So he understands. The sword has its own mind and tries to suck everything out of him to the last drop. But Takumi decides to go all in. He shouts at the sword, let it take his soul if that's what it takes to save his friends. Clinock only replies that he has not a single millimeter of strength to offer, and Takumi remains completely bewildered. Takuma freezes in place while the sword tells him that this is absolutely impossible. Seriously, impossible. They say this sword has been magical for a long time, but for the first time it met a person with zero power. Leia peeks from behind and praises him, impressed that he can hold Soul Eater and stand there so calmly. She concludes his power is probably infinite, so even a legendary magical sword cannot drink it all to the bottom. Takumi tells her that she is absolutely right, although inside he himself screams that she is completely wrong. The blade ignored them and got angry, explaining that everyone born in this world has a vessel for power. She insists that power grows from the moment of birth, so she wonders why the hell Takumi has none at all. Takumi awkwardly apologizes to the air and says he honestly doesn't know. It all becomes strange because when Leia asks what he is talking about, because she definitely cannot hear the voice he answers to, he realizes only he can hear the meaning of the sword. He just turned around and became a strange old man talking to himself. The goblins just stared at him and nervously whispered among themselves, because they have no idea what is happening. But then Takumi notices they keep their distance. He understands they are really afraid of the dark aura coming from the magical sword, so he tries to use the mood, puts on a desperate smile, and politely asks the sword Mr. Magic if he minds dealing with the goblins for him. The sword immediately shuts him down and asks why the hell it should help a guy with zero power. And Takumi awkwardly admits there is some sense in that. And then the sword changes its tone and says that the little girl standing here has a power that is almost laughable. It says to Takumi, if he regularly lets her drain her energy, it might decide to help him. Takumi nervously asks if it promises to hold back at least a little. And the sword agrees, assuring him that it wouldn't want to destroy such valuable property because that would be sheer wastefulness. That is enough for Takumi, so the contract is officially made right here on the spot. The sword says it's time to quickly clean up this mess, and suddenly dark energy spheres start popping up around them. And Takumi swings the blade and unleashes a devastating strike called Evil Dragon Dark Great Flame Bullet to erase everything to the ground. Takumi shouts the name of the attack, but the sword immediately scorches him, asking why he had to shout it like that. It's too cringy and embarrassing. So the goblins barely have time to panic and the attack already hits. And from the darkness bursts a huge column of dark energy, completely destroying the forest and taking the goblins with it. When the dust settles, Leia is fully charged and says he is incredible, but Takumi is actually just exhausted and trying not to fall. But Leia offers her own explanation. She says, he seemed to be standing and just stupidly staring at one point, but that supposedly is the legendary state of nothing, the very one needed for this move. Takumi is trembling with sweat the whole time because she is completely wrong, but he calmly goes forward and says that she understood everything perfectly. Then the sword whispers that the work is done and orders Takumi to keep the promise. Takumi quietly agrees just at the moment Leia runs forward, and he immediately resorts to gaslighting to fulfill the condition. He rages at her and says that allowing such a sword to drain energy from her simply shows how inexperienced she still is. Leia buys it instantly and immediately apologizes, saying that now she really feels a huge difference in strength between them. And she screams that compared to Takumi's strength, her own strength is just trash worthlessness. Takumi quietly cries internal tears and admits to himself that in reality he is simply a complete nobody, but he continues to keep up appearances. He tells Leah that besides peeling potatoes, she now has daily training with a magic sword and they drain her strength to the bone. Leah silently bowed, took a deep breath, and thanked Takumi for the incredible honor the second training mode, while Takumi felt only one thing, guilt for the lie. And the little elf girl points forward and warns Takumi, there are still enemies more than you can count. At that moment, a huge horde of monsters bursts onto the hilltop and looks straight at them. And in Takumi, the face pales as soon as he realizes, this is not a joke, there are too many of them. He tries to call his weapon, but the magical sword bluntly and unequivocally announces, today's working hours are over. Takumi reaches the limit and collapses, thinking that this time it is really the end, but suddenly. Finally, a gigantic dragon breaks through the trees with a terrible roar, and this is essentially the worst thing that could have happened. Takumi completely loses it and screams when he sees the dragon staring intently at him. The dragon roars over the battlefield, calls the goblins fools, and demands to know if they understand who they are facing. It announces to the entire army that the man standing there is their very own Dragon King Lord Takumi. Takumi is drenched in sweat as he looks up and realizes, this giant beast is actually Chloe in her dragon form. But she transforms back into human form to give an official report. She says she heard about the goblin army's invasion of the mountain and immediately rushed there. Takumi is completely confused. He asks aloud why this happened, since Leia only struck a few goblins at the ranch. But according to Chloe, rumors in the town say, Lord Takumi single-handedly destroyed so many goblins that it shook the entire nation. She says that the Goblin King himself is now leading the army to defeat him, and Takumi understands. This has escalated into a full-scale war. Chloe says that the Dragon Clan considers him their subordinate, so they intercept the enemy. But the number of goblins is so large that they cannot stop them all. Takumi tries to keep his composure in front of her, losing his train of thought. Then with a trembling voice blurts out that he understands and thanks her for the hard work. Inside, he realizes there would be even more enemies here if they weren't, so he is grateful. But he quietly insists that he definitely is not becoming the Dragon King. Chloe continues the report while the dragons burn the forest, explaining, this chaos will not end until they defeat the Goblin King leading the army. And she admits, even having the full power of the Dragon Clan on their side, they still have not managed to find him. Takumi looks confused, so Chloe explains. According to rumors, the Goblin King uses magic to transform into anyone he wants. Suddenly, Leia interrupts the conversation, too happy, as if for show. She announces that her power charge is complete and that she is ready to go. So she says that even if it is a hassle, they just need to solve the problem, cut down all the goblins in this area. Takumi and Chloe just silently stare at her, and Takumi points out that she is really just looking for an excuse to go wild. Leia panics and shouts back that he is mistaken, but she does not waste a second before. Activating her skill God Descent and summoning the Vermilion King to enhance her power, she really wanted to fight. Her face completely goes mad as she shouts that she will hit every enemy so hard that she will instantly bury them in the ground. And she unleashes a colossal attack that shatters the entire landscape. Stones and debris fly endlessly in all directions. Chloe asks if the Goblin King is hiding somewhere in the army, and a random goblin standing right nearby twitches and nervously says, he has no idea. She ignores the grumbling and turns back to Takumi, asking if he senses anything suspicious nearby because Takumi raises his weapon and shows that the magical sword is directly speaking to him, and that is definitely suspicious. He starts sweating and tries to explain that it is just a misunderstanding. And Chloe immediately recognizes the voice. It is an evil dragon sealed in the sword, a disgrace to their entire clan. The sword understands, there is no point in hiding anymore, clicks its tongue and admits that its cover is blown. Chloe looks impressed that sword sucks the life force of its owner, so she decides that Takumi is incredibly strong because he holds it, although he himself is trembling with fear. But as soon as she notices a small elf girl nearby, her gaze shifts, and she asks about the child as if she recognized her. Takumi panics and shouts that Chiharu is not the Goblin King, but Chloe replies, she knows because she sees it is actually new. Chiharu immediately loses her temper and shouts at Chloe, shut up until you reveal my secret identity. To quickly summarize, today Leia forcibly dragged along Chiharu's woven little one, and Chiharu is just standing there with the magical sword. But suddenly everything goes topsy-turvy when a huge explosion tears the ground right in front of them, and debris flies in all directions. Takumi frantically shouts Chloe's name and does not understand why she just attacked them. And she just looks at him from top to bottom and says as if she is really impressed, noting that he is quite clever for a person to survive in such a state. Then the leader of the enemies steps forward, a handsome elf, who introduces himself as Goblin King Jasrak. Takumi hears the name Jasrek and immediately stops everything, muttering that he is doomed. He can understand just by looking that the Goblin King is incredibly strong, so he turns to his weapon with tears in his eyes and will beg the magical sword to save him from this guy. The sword instantly shuts him down, reminding him, it only works once a day and the shift has officially ended. Jasrek smiles as if this place belongs to him and asks Takumi if it is time to start so. Takumi completely freezes in place, sweating profusely, and with a trembling voice barely utters broken "nice to meet you" in English. Then a flashback appears, the story of the Goblin King. It turns out he started as the weakest monster in the world. Compared to all the other huge buff goblins in his tribe, this little one was extremely pathetic. This was back in ancient times, so a nobody like him should have died immediately. But he was such a disgusting coward that his danger sense went far beyond all limits even compared to others. He kept telling himself, as long as he survives, he can become stronger later, so he focused only on surviving. For over 1,000 years, he hid in the darkness, slowly gathering knowledge and power while time passed. And eventually that little goblin changed. He kept evolving further until he mastered magic. No one could defeat him, and only then, becoming the strongest Goblin King, he stands here today. Takumi understands this whole tale about persistence and never giving up. It's not just a story, it's real life, and the living legend from that story stands right before him. Jasrek starts clapping his hands and he smiles, telling Takumi that he is truly touched to hear his old story told like this, even though he knows Takumi was just buying time. Takumi starts sweating profusely because his plan to buy time just failed immediately. But the Goblin King simply leans closer and admits that Takumi really interested him, and that he has been interested in him for a long time. He wants to know exactly what kind of guy sits at the very top of the adventure, ranking the strongest in the universe. So Tatsumi awkwardly tries to brush it off, stammers, and insists that it's not such a big deal, but Jasrex does not believe this humble act. He ignites his magic and declares that his ancient arts can perfectly measure how strong his opponents are. Then he gets lost. He tells Takumi that for the first time in all his magic she is starting from zero and he cannot read Takumi's power level at all. Takumi simply shouts the truth and looks him straight in the face. The reading is empty because his power literally equals zero. Jasrek ignores the statistics. He says he desperately wants to fight right now, while Takumi turns away and cries he just wants to go home, and Jasrek's gaze suddenly snaps wide open as soon as he senses something ahead, and he realizes it seems they will no longer be allowed to reach the showdown. Suddenly, a huge explosion of dark energy tears between them. The earth is ripped out with roots, and their paths diverge. Jasrek looks too composed and harsh. He admits he did not feel the attacker even until the last second, exactly as he expected from the great sage. Chiharu appears looking absolutely furious and orders the Goblin King to shut up and stop pretending to be too brave. Takumi starts asking about her connection with Nuru Hache, but she cuts him off mid-sentence, says there is never time to explain, and that they will talk later. She bursts straight into the fight, shouts "wave gun," and fires a huge burst of energy downward. Jasrek folds his arms to block the hail of strikes. He understands this technique definitely belongs to Nuru Hache. Takumi watches from the side and finally begins to doubt whether there is really something deeper between Chiharu and this Nuru Hache, or if it is just an impression. Action, and Chiharu shoots a finger straight at the opponent like a pistol and simply says, "Bang." Takumi excitedly asks if the strike hit, but immediately answers himself, "No." Jasrek notes that Chiharu is barely breathing and no longer holding form, so Takumi panics and shouts her name. He suddenly becomes serious and says there is no point in living if you run away and leave the child behind, and he shouts that he will handle this himself no matter what. Just then, a strange, quiet crackling bursts from the hilt of his sword. And the sword actually spoke. It says everything will be fine, it will provide a special service and help him one last time. Takumi fires a huge explosion burst from his weapon, scattering everywhere, but Jasrek blocks it with one hand, admitting that this particular power is starting to get a bit annoying. Lee appears out of nowhere and announces that she has already taken care of everything for Takumi. The smoke from the explosion clears, revealing Leia standing guard. Takumi calls to her from behind. Jasrek just casually shrugged and said this situation had turned into a complete waste of time. And he tells Takumi that he is really drawn to crazy people. First a great sage, now a dragon's apprentice and a demonic sword. He raises his eyes to the moon through a hole in the cave ceiling as if he is tired of how it all ended. Then he mumbles to himself that he actually feels a slight chill in the air, maybe instincts are waking up. He barely smiles at Takumi, admitting that it seems he cannot reach the strongest in the entire universe without first defeating all the others. He pulls up his glove, weighs it, and decides that it's too much trouble, so he announces, "Today he retreats." The man abruptly turns around. With dramatic charm, his huge cloak rustles fiercely behind him as he turns to leave, but he is not finished yet. Out of nowhere, a huge ball of magical energy bursts forth and flies straight at the group. Chloe immediately sees the attack and prepares to block it, shouting that this guy has incredible audacity. Leia notices something in the distance and immediately points at the cave gate, shouting that he is there. Chloe flies in and asks if he used some trick to escape, and Leia shouts that he must be caught and finished off so that it all ends. The girls take off, but Takumi stands still. He says he is not chasing them and that he is fine right here. The truth, however, is rather depressing. He watches the dust settle and simply asks if anyone really thinks he can run that fast. He stands there all alone when suddenly a voice rings out right from behind, calling him absolutely terrifying. Jasrek stands in the shadows and tells Takumi that he is the first person in history to see through his final trick. Takumi starts sweating profusely as soon as he realizes others were chasing the mannequin. It turns out he is left alone with the boss and now they will kill him. But Jasrek completely misunderstood the fear. He raises his hands and says that Takumi is on a much higher level than he imagined. He holds his hands up and orders Takumi, let him finish him off. This is his complete defeat. The moon casts light on the silence of the battlefield, and Takumi freezes there, asking himself why this is happening again. So the crazy deadly fight with the Goblin King suddenly cuts to a strange finale. From his hip, the magical sword spoke and asked Takumi if he was really sure it was okay not to finish off that man. Takumi waves his hand indifferently and tells the sword that the enemy probably won't come back anyway, so it's fine. The sword says he is completely naive and that in this state he won't survive, then blushes and adds, she might just protect him because he is helpless. Takumi turns around and asks if the sword just said something, and she immediately cuts him off. No, he said nothing. The goblin problem is solved, but Takumi realizes his troubles are growing, like the mystery of Chiharu, the story with the Dragon King and Leia's training. He is immediately struck by a cold sweat when the realization hits. The list of unsolved cases in his hands keeps getting longer and longer each time. He gazes into the distance and has no idea what will happen to him next. And the sword simply admires his side profile, seeing in it the same dark, gloomy mood. But reality turns out far less cool. Takumi's legs tremble so much that he admits 2 more seconds and he will have an accident in his pants. Meanwhile, Jasrek is completely broken. He understands. Against this guy he is absolutely powerless and concludes that it was foolish to think he could ever escape. Trembling, Jasrek sharply leans back. He realizes he is facing the strongest warrior of humanity and immediately loses all self-control. He begins to panic, thinking they have been watching his every move, so he understands there is only one shameful way out left. The king falls to his knees and cries for mercy, ready to humiliate himself just to survive. But he raises his gaze and realizes the plan has failed. A massive fist is already flying straight at his face. Leia, while he was bowing, delivered a full-force blow to him, shouting that he caused Takumi too much trouble. The hook strikes sharply and lashes the enemy straight into the sky like a rocket. And Leia pulls the bloodied goblin back, apologizing to Takumi because she thinks she caught only a fake. Takumi tells her not to worry, he made him swear never to come back here again. While a goblin runs away behind her back, he asks if he really found the real body. Takumi just watches as the kid dashes away and says, that guy was crying his eyes out and kept apologizing endlessly. Leia starts praising him for spotting the real enemy while everyone else got hooked. She fully believes this and she can't believe that he deliberately let the Goblin King go, especially since every time he escapes, he becomes stronger. She claims that Takumi is challenging the enemy. Like, let him come back because he's getting even tougher, and it looks like a cool message from a warrior. Takumi is sweating all the time but forces himself to smile and tells her that she perfectly figured out his plan. But deep inside he is completely lost and has no idea what hidden message he is even discussing. Anyway, he tells everyone, good job, and Chloe offers the leftovers of the potato soup she made yesterday. So she politely says she'd be happy to join, but just as they go inside, Chloe suddenly twitches and freezes as if sensing something strange. She turns around and looks at him with a serious face and calls him by name. And she apologizes for asking but wants to know, will he give up the magical sword he keeps with him? Takumi asks her what will happen if he really hands it over. She looks him straight in the eyes and says that she will now break that thing in half with her bare hands. It sounds too intense, so Takumi gets a little sweaty and asks to explain the whole story behind it, but Chloe starts from afar, telling how once a true genius was born among the dragon clan. They said that this dragon had so much talent that over time he would become stronger even than the ancient dragon. And everyone had huge expectations, raising him as the next candidate for Dragon King. Takumi listens but deep down thinks, this story is dragging on too long and his soup is getting cold. Chloe does not stop and keeps insisting that genius hit his head and made the talent start doing foolish things. Later it all turned into the evil dragon losing his real name and being forever expelled from the clan. Takumi nervously glances down at the weapon on his thigh and quietly repeats, evil dragon. The blade suddenly cuts into the narrative, claiming that he is actually not evil and that all this is just one big misunderstanding. Chloe completely ignores the voice and continues to explain. The expelled dragon held a grudge and looked for fights with the clan every day just to annoy them. She says the clan finally lost patience because of endless bullying, so they sealed the evil dragon in a demon sword so that it would finally shut up. The blade starts nervously sweating, mumbling that it has zero memory of ever doing anything like that, and Takumi realizes the weapon on his hip is definitely talking. Chloe points to the right at the blade and drops a huge bomb that evil dragoness is not just some random monster. She is actually her older sister Karna. Takumi completely loses his composure at the revelation. He recoils and shouts sister, in shock. With a serious look, Chloe emphasizes once again. The demon's sword is called Karna, and she really is that same embarrassing older sister. The sword clinks again in the same mundane tone, agreeing that it is true and confirming Chloe is her younger sister. Takumi looks at Chloe anxiously and asks if she really intends to break the sword in half, even though they are family. And Chloe does not hesitate, explaining. Her foolish sister is currently absorbing power because she is sealed in order to later resurrect herself. Chloe sharply says that she simply must stop the resurrection so that it does not happen so. So Takumi asks if it would really be such a disaster if her sister came back to life. And she. When she confirms that it would be a catastrophe, stating, her sister would just immediately return to endless evil. Takumi tightly grips the hilt and directly asks the sword if this is really true or not. But Karna instantly denies this and swears that he will do no more evil. And before Kuchin asks for forgiveness with all sincerity. Chloe looks confused by his behavior and asks Takumi if he really communicated with the sword or if it was just like that. He confirms this and suddenly realizes Chloe cannot hear the voice of her own sister at all. She says that most likely only the true owner of the sword can hear it, that is, he is the only one in the whole world. Then she bursts out with curiosity and asks if the sword might be saying something about her now. And Takumi conveys the message literally, saying that she is really thinking over her actions and asks Kuchin for forgiveness. Chloe quietly murmurs her sister's nickname and seems to tremble from the sudden apology from the sword. She tells Takami that she does not fully trust him, but since he is the one holding the sword today, she will let it slide. Then she prepares to leave and says, even if the sword decides to be evil, he is strong enough to easily punish it. Takumi watches her with his eyes all sweaty and thinks that he is definitely not capable of that. Later, Chiharu tries to get his attention, pokes and squeezes his cheeks, calling his name so he glances at the letter nearby out of the corner of his eye. He is still interested in the Goblin King and Chiharu's mystery, but he decides not to rush. He looks at her and thinks, whoever she really is, right now she is so sweet and that is quite enough for him. Finally, he picks up the envelope from the floor and breaks the seal to see what is inside. And he immediately notices the headline. It is an official message addressed to everyone in the top 10 among the strongest adventurers. The letter announces the Demon King of the Ancestors has resurrected, so the guild is calling an emergency meeting for the top 10 right now. Takumi decides to completely ignore that terrible letter from the guild. He hides it and tells himself that during sleep he will just pretend he never saw it. He shifts his attention to something much better and announces that for lunch today there will be mushroom and chicken meatball hot pot. He turns back to Chiharu. She is no longer asleep and gives her credit for the food, checking once again that it was she who gathered the mushrooms for them. Chiharu beams with a huge smile and confirms this, proudly stating that yes, she went out and collected them all herself. Suddenly, the sword at his belt softly squeaks. The food looks delicious, and it asks if he wouldn't mind pouring a little broth on the blade later. Tatsuki immediately stops this. He tells the sword that it is categorically rejected because washing a sticky sword afterward would be just terribly troublesome. 3 days have passed since the Goblin King's attack and life has finally returned to normal while he serves the soup. Takumi says that quite some time has passed since those days when nothing happened, just a peaceful afternoon rest with Chiharu. When a hand suddenly snatches from behind and firmly grabs him by the shoulder. An old man with a long beard stands nearby and asks the group, could they give him another bowl? Leia instantly sprang back into a fighting stance, reaching for her blade, and shouted at the stranger to identify himself. The old man does not notice her at all. He just keeps chewing and mumbling how delicious his food is. He asks what dish it is, instantly understands. The cutlets contain crushed chicken cartilage, and it turns out this gourmet is Barbaroi Saza, head of the Adventurers Guild. Chiharu looks completely exhausted when she sees him, because he is the one and only person Nero Hachai previously said she never wanted to fight. Takumi immediately switches to chef mode and replies that he mixed crushed lotus root with cartilage and thickened the broth with potato starch. He forces a nervous smile on his face as he tells the head that the texture should be quite pleasant for him. Barbaroi doesn't even lift his eyes. He just loudly slurps the soup and continuously mumbles how tasty it is. The narrator notes, although Alice or the ancient dragon may have much more pure power, Barbaroi is absolutely the last person anyone would want to fight because because Takumi recalls hearing about this man's fighting style. The very thing that even the great sage Nihru Hachai feared about him is. His entire strategy is based on simply knocking people out with a punch, without hesitation. The strategy is simple yet dirty. Use any method to confuse the opponent and make yourself look completely weak and harmless. You must completely hide your energy, but only at the moment when you strike, you explode with power and knock them down with a single hit. Chiharu is still staring at him in complete shock, mumbling about that old man while he just sits and eats. And he is pleased that Barbara Roy catches the mood, laughing and asking if anyone has ever hated him, then silently offers them a candy like a sweet grandfather. Takumi looks at him and realizes the rumors are true. Barbara Roy is so frail that even Takumi thinks he can defeat him. The leader immediately changes the subject, asking if they have seen the announcement from 10 big ones recently, and Takumi admits he missed it. Barbara Roy says, "I see," quietly, and his eyes suddenly lose all that friendly warmth. And then, as if out of nowhere, he flies up and kicks the entire pot of boiling soup right at them, as if to say nothing can be done. Lee reacts instantly, sharply draws her blade and with a sharp cry blocks the scalding attack before it hits them. Leia immediately rushes forward, shouting that it was only a provocation, and orders everyone to calm down while Chiharu jumps into the fight to protect Takami. Barbara Roy waves off with laughter like a crazy old man, apologizes and admits that he attacked them only because he wanted to see how they would react. But his face suddenly hardens when he mutters that he tried to calculate Takumi's strength. But since Takumi didn't even flinch, it means his power is simply bottomless. Put aside snowfalls and time for feeding the fire mock the head, saying that his own ability is not enough to ever measure someone like Takumi. Takumi dies inside, afraid to admit he didn't hold the position not because he couldn't but because he was strong enough. But in reality, he was just scared to death and didn't move a single muscle. Well, the head moves on to business, says it looks very bad if hero number 1 is not present at the 10 Greats meeting. So he decided to simply cancel the meeting at the guild headquarters and hold the entire meeting here, in this place, instead of him. Takumi completely freezes, staring blankly, and lets out a confused sound just as it dawns on him. Barbaroy adds that everyone else will arrive any moment, and by the way says he doesn't need any tea while they wait. Then he gestures to call the figure in the darkness standing behind his back, and says that his subordinate will take on all the boring groundwork for the event. Takumi tells the guy that he's already leaving the guild. He was already planning to go on vacation, so he doesn't care about saying goodbye, no reproaches or regrets. Leia even flares up and shouts that Tatsumi unhesitatingly gives up the number 1 spot. She considers his attitude simply incredible. She keeps going and going, declaring that he doesn't need the title because he is the strongest in the universe. For her, this is an unchanging fact. Barbaroy says he understands everything. He knows. Takumi initially planned to just leave the guild to remove his name from the ranking. Takumi replies that the opportunity to tell the leader everything directly preserves his trip, so it turns out perfect. But Barbaroy ignores the tone and asks about the letter, calling the revival of the ancestor Demon King the reason for this meeting. The old man says that they do not know where the Demon Lord is hiding, but in fact they have known for 10 years that he has returned to life. He raises 2 fingers and adds that the enemy hides his power somewhere in secret, and that is basically all they have for now. Now Takumi looks irritated and asks what all this demon nonsense is about if he has decided to quit the guild, but Barbaroy completely ignores the question and addresses him only formally, calling him the title of first rank among adventurers. Barbaroy drops a giant bomb on him, and the guild actually begins to suspect that Takumi is the main candidate for the next Demon King. Takumi completely loses his composure. He asks if he is really going to be certified as a villain just because of some huge misunderstanding. Barbaroy ignores the panic and says that the important conversation is already over. He hands the rest over to the secretary, and just like that, a woman in glasses steps forward. She introduces herself as Linden, the one who performs the duties of secretary to Chairman Barbaroy. She politely asks Takumi to remember her face from now on, and then begins to demonstrate her skills because she instantly erects a huge meeting hall right there. Tatsumi will beg them to stop and not build right in front of his house, but the platform is already ready. Let's move to the next morning, and in the mountains, high-altitude adventurers begin to appear one after another. By noon, everyone has already gathered, and Linden can only be seen sitting quietly and sipping tea, as if that's how it should be while Takumi stands outside looking miserable. He will beg them to stop making his house a gathering place for all this madness, but it's too late. The conference table is already set, and poor Takumi is stuck there in a circle all heavyweights. The meeting starts with Chairman Barbaroy Saza at rank 0, and right next to him Takumi rank 1, who is sweating profusely. Rank 2 is Goblin King Jastrek, who is substituting for Alice, while rank 3 Little Chiharu, she waves happily, substituting for Nuru Hache. Then rank 4 the hero at the end, he looks like he's asleep, and then to his right rank 5 a half-machine named Machina. Rank 6 is a beastly man named Zaha, grinning like a madman, and next comes Rank 700 Dagon and the hidden Rank 8 Yoro. Leia is also sitting there as the 9th ranked God Descender, and finally the group is completed with Rank 10, Silent Shield Rick. The head Barbaroi immediately gets down to business, officially announces the start of the 10th Greats meeting. And he announces that the main agenda is the resurrection of the ancestral Demon King, as well as how they plan to deal with the main suspect Takumi. He asks everyone to speak frankly and freely, hiding nothing. Takumi Migen immediately starts sweating. He understands. This whole meeting is already built on the fact that he himself is the candidate for Demon King. Suddenly, Beastman bursts into the conversation and asks what the point of this is. He says that this meeting is a show, so they just need to kill that man and end it. This is Rank 6 from Circer, Zaha just flipping a coin with his fingers but hinting at murder and Takumi completely loses it, thinking that this is already too scary from the very first call. But Barbaroi calmly cuts it off. He tells Zaha that they can't do that because they first need real, ironclad evidence. Zaha looks irritated and says that this is all a hassle. He believes they just need to kill him, and if they make a mistake, a simple sorry will fix everything. But in the heat of the dispute, a hand goes up and someone asks if they can ask a question. Rank 8 Ninja Yoru stands up from the side and speaks. He says he heard everything about the chaos that has been happening around Takumi lately. Everyone is already listening, even Rank 7 Super Hunter Dagon, who is sitting aside and watching with a keen eye. Yoru presents the facts. He recalls how Leia became a student and how Takumi repelled Black Dragon without even touching him. He adds that Takumi defeated Great Sage Narohachi and the army of Goblin King, and then asks if there is any mistake in this conclusion. Takumi is all sweaty because this is almost all true. He begins to suspect that he really might be the king of demons. Suddenly, his sword cuts into the conversation and reproaches them for not mentioning how he won it, and she orders Takun to correct them. Takumi immediately begs for the weapon. Come on, be quiet and don't rustle, until she makes it even worse. Yoru brushes off that minor flare-up and says there is one more critically important addition to the list. And he reveals that after the Narachachi were rejected, she was attacked by the student Tagumi Alisa, and now she is believed to be dead. Takumi is completely stunned when he hears that she died, but he asks Yoru if he is pretending to be stupid, because it was obviously his order. The little girl Chiharu, who is now playing the role of the great sage's trusted person, suddenly speaks up and asks about Naruhachi. And Takumi looks at her, pure panic fear on his face. He is really worried about where this is heading, and Chiharu only smiles brightly and tells everyone that Naruhachi is completely fine and there is nothing to worry about. Rank 4 hero named End ignores her smile and asks why a small child is sitting in the place of the great sage. And the head Barbara runs her fingers through her beard and says that it's not just because she is associated. He felt the aura of Naruhachi on her. A strange expression appears on his face and he says he has a theory. He suggests she is definitely Takumi and Naruhachi's secret child. Lee almost loses her mind and asks if it's true, and Takumi orders her to calm down. He knows it's impossible because he has never been with anyone. The hero cuts the drama by raising his hand. He says he has some additional information for the conversation. And the Rank 5 cyborg girl machinist silently watches from the side while he prepares to drop another bomb. The end shows 3 days after the Goblin King was beaten, Takumi was spotted at a secret meeting with Alice. The Goblin King Jasrek, now disguised as a human intermediary, returns to Takumi and asks if he has any excuse for this secret meeting, addressing him directly. Demon King Takumi and Takumi immediately boils over, pokes him with a finger and begs him to say something to clarify the misunderstanding, and Jasrek just sniffs as if he likes it. So Jasrek pulls out a scroll and announces that he actually brought a letter directly from Alice herself. He begins to read and it's a disaster. Alice babbles that he has an unworthy pupil, then his beloved, then writes, wait, cut this part out, but he leaves it, page after page of endless obsessed delirium. Takumi just stared into space with dead tired eyes, completely exhausted and crushed by how stupidly chaotic and downright shameful this letter was. But Jasrek is still reading Alice's words, where she apologizes for not coming, insisting that she is still too weak and not even worthy to show him her face. And then she drops a bomb. She writes that if the guild annoys him, she will simply kill them all for him. The mood in the room instantly freezes cold. But before anyone can react to the threat, the girl with cat ears suddenly appears out of nowhere and meets Takumi with a radiant smile. And she introduces herself. Beast King Miki's casually says she came for him and at the end adds Naya, as if that's how it should be. Zaha the Berserker has heard enough. He tightens his huge sword and says everything is confirmed. He will say no more and is ready to kill Takumi right here. Zaha wastes no time and brings his huge weapon down with a full force strike, but Miki's dodges as if it were nothing at all. She stares at him through a tense pause and licks her own palm. It turns out she is actually one of the 4 heavenly kings of the Demon King, and the rumors that she is frightening were completely true. Barbaroi enters to test her confidence. He says that even with her title she cannot handle such a number of powerful opponents alone. But Miki's just tilts her head and casually throws the old man a ninja half-throw, implying she can actually handle all of them without problems. The hero steps forward next and asks if she can keep such boldness after seeing his Excalibur, while Machina switches to bloody extermination mode to start a real fight. Machina coldly stares into her eyes, declares that Beast King is nothing more than prey, and promises to get rid of her quickly and quietly. Suddenly, the entire hall erupts with a scream. A powerful explosion tears the building apart, rips off the roof, and scatters debris throughout the room. Takumi immediately jumps up at the scream, asks them to stop, wildly waves his hands and desperately begs everyone to wait just a second, but it is too late. The dust settles, and Takumi remains sitting in his chair among the ruins, completely unable to stand up because his back betrayed him from fear. He tries to put on a serious face and says they need to resolve this through talks, but inside he is completely broken. His house is being torn to pieces. Maki instantly calms down and says that if the Demon King asks her to stop, she is totally okay with that, but Barbara does not believe this. He asks what else there is to discuss if there is already solid evidence in hand and everyone already knows who he is. Takumi is sweating all over but tries to hold his ground, insisting that he has not admitted anything yet. He sits right in the middle of the ruins and shifts his gaze to the Beast King, stating that he has a question. He directly asks why she thinks he is the Demon Lord and wants to know, has she ever even seen the face of this man? For a moment Maki looks a bit confused, meows, and simply admits, no, she has not. She explains that the Demon King transforms into a spirit and inhabits a human body only to keep his immense power under control. And because of this, she has never been able to confirm what his true form actually looked like in the past. Tatsumi watches her intently, still trembling inside with fear, and asks, if you don't recognize him, then why did you call me the Demon Lord? She answers politely and makes it clear that since the moment of resurrection she has been continuously tracking a specific energy signal of the Demon Lord. Meix explains, while the target is hiding their presence right now, she definitely sensed the energy of the Demon King in this very place just moments ago. Takumi even broke out in a sweat while processing this information. He mutters to himself, wait a moment, suddenly realizing something huge, and then he turns to the sword on his back and directly asks Karna if there is any possibility that the Demon King is actually inside him. Karna immediately cuts this off, telling Takumi that the probability is absolutely zero because he doesn't even have a vessel that normal people have. She keeps roasting him endlessly, explaining that inside him there is complete emptiness. Without a vessel to contain everything, neither power nor spirits can even stay in his body. Tears run down Takumi's cheeks. He was called empty and it hurts, but he admits the insult stings, but he actually breathes out in relief. This confirms that the terrible possibility that he is the very Demon King, without even knowing it, has officially disappeared. His eyes snap open sharply, a stern look without any doubt. Now that he is sure everything is clear, his brain switches to the main problem. He looks around at the group and points out that there are a bunch of other people here, so he asks why she decided that he is the suspect. Miki squints and slowly drops the heavy hint she just revealed. A few days ago she actually met Alice. Meix explains that it has already been 10 years since the resurrection of the Demon King, but that guy has never shown his face, so F. The four heavenly kings decided to take everything into their own hands. They began searching among people for a potential vessel. She throws out the first name from the list and reveals their main suspect is actually Alice. Maki says that even before the resurrection, 10 years ago, Alice lived in a large dungeon with a power that made no sense to a human. They were completely convinced she is the one they need. No matter how they looked at it, they believed that the Demon King chose her as his bearer. Meikesi was so confident that she visited Alice along with the other four heavenly kings, but it turned out, Alice is not the Demon King. Since she was not the boss, they asked her the obvious question, how did a human manage to acquire power far beyond human capabilities? Rewinding the minutes, Tatsumi begins to worry seriously. The thought enters his mind, something very bad is happening with this story and he already feels where it is all heading. Meiki raises a finger and says, Alice had only one thing to say in response and she drops a bomb. Alice told them directly, everything happened thanks to the leadership of Tatsumi. Takumi shouts, recalling how Alice insists that this is a complete lie. He found her in that dungeon and she was already far beyond human capabilities and Meix simply ignores him, stating that at this stage they cannot think of anyone except Lord Takumi the Demon King. Someone else among those present picks up and nods, as if to say the matter is already settled. So Lyndon lifts his glasses and, confirming everything with his own fake data, declares that he measured the probability at 120. The leaders of the travelers immediately become hostile, and he draws a wedge to defeat the Demon King, while another fighter calls him the perfect final prey. Mascana does not waste a second. She activates her Great Massacre mode and announces that she is starting combat operations right now. Even Yoro prepares to strike silently and whispers that he intends to destroy the target, but Leia steps forward without any hesitation. She tells Takumi that everything is fine, and even if he is the Demon King, she will follow him anywhere. Chiharu also joins the team and shouts that she will go with them under any circumstances, and Barbero lowers his head and says that by Alice's order he will henceforth serve Takumi as a loyal subordinate. Even the armored warrior Rick steps forward from behind and announces that he is taking Takumi's side too. So Maki raises his claws to make a count. He points out the group is split exactly in half, so this is a 6 versus 6 fight. When the team took their places, a voice asks Takumi why he does not stand up to fight, but he only hunches over the Soul Eater's sword. Takumi trembles all the time because the truth is that he physically cannot get up now. He is in complete fear. He lies in place and continuously shudders, pressed to the floor. His legs have completely given out from the blow, and he himself is chained to the ground by fear. Leia completely misunderstands the situation, but proudly declares that this is exactly like in Takami supposedly. He doesn't even need to get up for such weaklings. Chiharu immediately agrees with the delusion, and emphasizing that she has so much endurance, as if she plans to defeat everyone while sitting. Takumi understands that there is no other choice, he must embrace their crazy theory, so he forcibly presses his trembling lips into a wooden smile, and he leans back onto his stone throne layer like a true boss and tells them that they did well figuring it out. That was his exact plan. He sits and looks down on everyone full of confidence. And this is how the legend of Demon King Takumi officially begins. The head Barbaroi decides to relieve the tension and says to stop the fight right here and now. And he announces the decision. In exactly 1 month, a big guild martial arts tournament is to take place. He suggests that both sides send a team of representatives, and the winner will receive one specific wish that will be granted. Takumi tries to keep himself together, though sweat pours down like rain, and asks if the head really means that they can ask for anything. So Barbaroi spreads his hands, confirms and promises that the guild will not interfere with Takumi at all. And if that is exactly what Takumi wants, they will never set foot in this place again. Takumi calculates everything for his team. Jasrek, Leia, and Chiharu are nearby, but he admits besides them he has only one ally. Barbaroi tells him not to worry about the numbers. If Takumi is confident enough, he can fight himself. Then Maix bursts in with a crazy idea. He suggests bringing the other 3 Heavenly Kings to join the squad. Realizing he will have reinforcements, Takumi leans back on his stone and coolly accepts the challenge. Barbaroi confirms that the deal is already decided and says he will send the guild representatives list later. And he looks back at Takumi sitting on his stone and sees, despite everything, he looks completely composed. Barbaroi admits if Takumi really wants, he could probably cut them all down without any effort. But he stops and does not go further to add one last condition. He clenches his fists and warns him not to underestimate the guild, addressing him directly Demon King Takumi. With a sinister, tense look, Barbaroi reveals they still have a secret trump card up their sleeve. Takumi keeps an impassive face and calmly tells the leader that he looks forward to seeing it. As soon as they leave, Takumi stays in place and replays the conversation over and over, realizing he has just gotten involved in an incredibly big fight. He instantly decides his master plan is to disgrace himself in the first round and run away because when he saw that there was not a trace of joke in Barbara Roy's eyes and she was really ready to kill him, he got so scared that a random waterfall appeared just to hide how he wet his pants. Finally, the day of the great tournament arrived, and the city under the bright sky looks colossal. There at the guild headquarters, everything is already set up for the start of the main event, so inside the hall, huge banners are unfolding, and the host announces that the lottery for the main tournament's main bracket starts right now. He tells everyone in the crowd to get ready for the grand opening. And the full list dropped and it has crazy matchups. Chairman Barbaroi against everyone, Takumi at the top rank, Alice, and also all the monster kings like Mayakis and Chloe. Takumi fixed his gaze on the board and suddenly felt that same battle manga vibe. He knew for sure, if he really starts fighting, he will die in 2 seconds So he puts on a very tense face and silently swears that under no circumstances will he give up without any concession. Later, Takumi passes through the market area, and some guys whisper to each other that they noticed the Demon King's party, and one of them panics and tells his friend not to look into the eyes because he will literally be cursed to death. Takumi ignores the terrible rumors about himself, and Mayaki just casually appears behind him and says that he wants some cotton candy. Takumi brushes off Mayaki, apologizes, but says that on the way home he will buy her cotton candy. And he begins to wind himself up inside. He realizes, literally the 4 Heavenly Kings are following him, and because of this he feels as if he himself is the true Demon King. He stares ahead motionlessly, truly pondering whether he will ever be able, when this mess is finally sorted out, to return to being an ordinary everyday guy. Then he shifts his gaze to the colossal stadium and thinks that he has never fought on such a magnificent stage before. and the shrine maiden steps forward, holding paper amulets. She tells him that this is the work of the four god pillars. They have also heard about this in the eastern lands. She explains that the four divine beasts Genbu, Byako, Seryu, and Suzaku guard the four directions of the world to transform the arena into a sacred space. And she breaks down the mechanics. Her magic is in the pillars. So Genbu blocks fatal blows, Byako catches cheaters, Seryu heals wounds, and Suzaku brings the dead back to life. She clarifies, if even one of these safeguards activates, it counts as a defeat for the fighter. But the main thing is no one will actually die in this arena. Takumi instantly relaxes and says, that's great. Now he can fight without any doubts. He is confident that he will not be killed. But the Imperial Maiden completely misunderstood him. She stammers in surprise and decides that he is only worried because his incredible power might accidentally kill his opponent. Takumi decides to pick up the game with the Jade Goddess Maiden and her misunderstanding. He tells her that he has figured everything out perfectly, although he himself knows she is completely wrong. Suddenly Linden appears in her maid outfit, politely bows, and tells Lord Takami that she has been waiting for him, and she leads everyone to the bench designated for the Demon King army, so Takumi remains, sweating nervously all the time because this mark is definitely not the right one either. The girl announcer on the big screen gets fired up and shouts into the microphone that the main fight of the martial tournament officially begins. Next, they show a clip where a hand pulls a numbered ball from a box, just to prove that the drawing for the matches was strict and fair. The announcer theatrically raises her hand and orders the entire stadium to look at the big screen where the final tournament bracket is already displayed. The diagram shows the entire lineup. Takumi faces Chairman Barbaroi Saza in the very first match of the day. Once the Tagumi sword spoke immediately and said that this supposedly random lottery draw reeks of a complete conspiracy. Takumi just shrugs and says it doesn't matter who his opponent is, mainly because he knows there is no one on that list he can actually defeat. The crowd goes wild as the announcer shouts that they won't waste time and will start the first match of the first round right now. The girl host calls out, Chairman Barbaroi, Lord Takami enter the arena, and Barbaroi quietly chuckles to himself and says that it's finally time to begin. Takumi remembers what Nirohachi told him. This is the same man Nirohachi hates fighting the most. He uses all dirty tricks to catch the opponent off guard. They say he deliberately pretends to be weak and hides his presence to lull opponents into a false sense of security. Takumi understands. If his opponent pretends to be weak, it's even advantageous because he himself is actually a real weakling. In the stands, Lee shouts to him not to use his special move, yet she will easily handle everyone left in the tournament. Despite the noise, Takumi looks at the chairman and asks if he can clarify one thing before they start the fight. He looks him straight in the eyes and asks if it was Barbaroi who suspected him of being a demon lord. But he does not get an answer. The announcer immediately shouts to start the first fight. And Barbaroi does not waste a second. He instantly rushes forward and delivers a heavy throw strike to Takumi, just as he hasn't even had time to react. Lee shouts his name from the stands and Takumi instantly realizes dodging this attack is already impossible. The blow lands with colossal force, the arena cracks, the floor breaks apart and debris flies everywhere. But Barbaroi did not hit him. He pressed Takumi to the ground and unleashed a sealing secret art dark drain circle. Karna shouts from the sword that this is actually dark magic. She hisses, it's impossible to use such a technique without preparation, but Barbaroi breathes hoarsely and sweats profusely. He looks completely exhausted as he tells Takumi that it is finally over. Dark tentacles begin to wrap around Takumi's body while Barbaroi explains that postponing their fight for a month was part of the plan. And forcing Takumi to participate in this grand tournament was also just a pretext. He admits that every one of his actions is only to create conditions for the application of this one specific technique. And he secretly embedded this ritual magic into the floor of the arena for the entire month. And he simply exhausted all his strength to the last drop to finally activate it. Takumi begins to sweat nervously and asks if it is a complete violation to prepare a trap long before the match, but Barbaroi says that it is just a loophole. He added it after the arena was already built, so it is a fair game, and he fixes his gaze directly on him, throwing out that it does not matter how much insane power Takumi restrains because this magic circle is created to drink up all the energy to the last drop until absolutely nothing remains. Such revenge does not scare him, just thinks it feels exactly the same as Karna's ability with power exhaustion. And he understands, since it hits the entire territory, in essence it is even a better version of the power of his own sword. Barbaroi starts laughing so hard that his head shakes and says, curtain call. He orders Takumi to shut up and die. But Kazumi just tears off the dark tentacles from himself while Barbaroi looks on in complete stupor, not believing his own eyes. The head boasts again and again that his technique catches even gods and says, sorry, I am too strong. But Takumi says that is disgusting and ridiculous. The attack only works against the strong, and his strength is literally zero. Barbaroi completely loses it. He looks at Takumi in pure fear and screams, asking who the hell he really is. And he jerks his hand, pokes him with a trembling finger, and asks if Takumi is some kind of monster standing above both gods and demon kings. When no one is watching, Karna whispers from the sword, "Just tell Takumi your usual cool line and finish this." Takumi folds his arms, grins boldly, and says to Barbaroi, "He figured everything out, perfectly played the role like a professional." That's exactly how Barbaroi falls, and the announcer shouts that the winner of the first round is the strongest in the universe, Takumi. Takumi waves to the crowd, while the announcer shouts that he took down Chairman Barbaroi and didn't even sweat. But the crowd is confused. One guy says that even with his special eyes he couldn't see anything, and the match ended instantly. They start pulling out crazy theories, whether Takumi has an instant kill circle or he controls the very air itself. It was actually a mass self-destruction, but Chiharu doesn't care. She rushes at him and shouts how cool he was, and Leia hugs him tightly and says it was wonderful, and Chloe chimes in, boasting that this is exactly what she expected from her fiancé. Mikey slides inside with a smile and asks the Demon King if he is recruiting brides, then offers her to join the squad as well. Lee and Chloe immediately snap, both shout at her at the same moment, saying that she definitely won't be taken with them. The crowd watches as the drama unfolds, and some of the guys go crazy with jealousy over the harem, shouting that they won't forgive him for this. The announcer cuts into the broadcast to keep the event moving, shouting, "The second duel of the first round starts right now, so." She calls them by name, ordering Linden Lindbergh and Dogma to make their way to the arena to the surface. Dogma is that huge armored guy who tells everyone to relax because he is almost immortal even without a safety barrier. He boasts that it is absolutely impossible for any mere mortal to cause him any harm. And he looks down intently at Linden, warning, if she decides to forfeit the match, that will be the only moment she succeeds. He adds that he is not good enough to start feeling sorry for someone as soon as the fight begins, but Linden does not look scared in the slightest. She just adjusts her outfit and bows, wishing him a good day as befits a true maid. Linden Kumlai says goodbye, and right on time the space behind her literally tears, cracks, and opens. Mikey and Takumi look completely stunned, and Mikey explains that the guy was simply erased by spatial teleportation. She calls Dogma an idiot for never playing defense because he usually ignores damage, but is still shocked that he couldn't handle that magic. Takumi starts sweating and wonders if Dogma really lost just because he was weak to magic, or if Linden really turned out to be much stronger than they all expected, then the spatial spells were no joke. The announcer shouts that since Dogma technically disappeared now, Linden Lindbergh takes the victory by default. Mayek is scared to leave, grumbling that Dogma is a disgrace to the four heavenly kings, so she will have to save their reputation herself. The announcer calls to start the third fight of the first round, and on Makey's face is a terrible, completely serious expression. They call Mayeks and Dagon to the arena. Dagon steps onto the platform all composed, ready to fight, and here we next jump to the fourth match. Azathoth the Dark King completely destroyed Maskine and took the victory. The female host after that last match completely breaks down, shouts that the demonic army is incredibly strong, and asks if humans even have a chance against the monsters. Takumi watches from the stands and gets soaked with fear. He thinks, even if they are formally allies, that fight was too brutal, and he is scared of what will happen if they find out he is a fake. He turns to Mayek, who is sitting nearby, and for a second becomes serious. Asks if it is really impossible for demons and humans to just live together peacefully. Mayek immediately cuts down that idea. She tells him that it is impossible because the weak will always fear the powerful, and the strong will always trample the weak, and this repeatedly fuels the cycle of fights endlessly. She throws him a sharp glance and says that her clan simply does not follow someone weak. Trying to imagine a future where they live in peace with humans is pure contradiction. The heavy words of that conversation barely fade. The scoreboard lights up. The third match of the first round. Beast King Mayakis and Super Hunter Dagon face off. The fight starts and ends in a moment. The other adventurers in the crowd are completely shocked. They stammer that someone like Dagon just got got absolutely wrecked. This is a pure one-sided rout. Dagon instantly exposes and Mayakes takes the victory. Makis buzzes about their king needing to be the weakest person who understands everyone's pain. And she says there is a catch: that same weak human must be stronger than all of them too. She tells him directly, such a person simply does not exist in this world. And Takumi starts sweating. He is sure he would definitely have won if it were only a fight over who is weaker. Maki asks if he forgot that he long ago gave up that dream of peace, but they. Then she tells Demon King Takumi that as soon as this tournament ends, 4 of them must head to the border. Here, Takumi panics and tries to stop her. This is too much information at once. Suddenly he realized that ancient Demon King actually wanted to live in peace with humans back then. The host cuts the moment short and shouts that it's time to start the 5th fight of the first round. She calls Leia and Yoru to immediately enter the arena. The next fight is already starting. Leia turns around with a confident smile and orders Takumi to watch her carefully. Takumi starts trembling from tension but tries to stay brave. He tells her to go out and do everything she can while he watches from the stands. But as soon as she goes out, he notices a mysterious letter hidden in his pocket, and he opens the letter to read the chilling message. I have not forgotten you and the order to meet under the big tree behind the arena. Takumi immediately finds a classic excuse and tells Chiharu that he just needs to go to the bathroom for a minute. And she looks too worried about him, so he raises his hand and promises her that he will return immediately. He goes out to the meeting place, and from behind the tree a voice says that they already knew, he is the Demon King. The shadow asks how to address him now. Is Demon King the correct title, or is there something else in then? And the voice continues, if he is not against it, they can just leave everything as it was before. And Linden comes outside with a sharp look and tells him to just call her Linden Lindbergh. Takumi immediately takes the bull by the horns. He sweats a little when he asks Linden what exactly she wants from him. She completely ignores his question and starts talking about flowers, mentioning that blue roses did not exist in the past. Linden explains, since they were never real, the language of flowers they used symbolized the word impossible. And she says that this has changed. When the first blue rose finally appeared in this world, a new meaning was born with it. She extends her hand and says that when the flower achieved the impossible, its meaning transformed into something else. And she theatrically freezes, showing that now the blue rose means dreams come true. Takumi rubs his eye, completely confused by the poetry at this hour, and asks her again what she really wants him to do. Linden smiles and this time gives him a direct answer. She says she does not want him to do anything at all. He asks if she really means that he should continue to eternally play the role of the Demon King. But she immediately corrects him, saying, yes, that's right, but the matter is not only about how he plays the Devil King. Linden lists all his crazy titles, the strongest in the universe and the like, and tells her she wants him to remain the Demon King forever. Takumi looks completely lost and asks why she needs such a thing, but she just looks at him and says it's a secret. She will only tell him when he can actually defeat her in battle. Takumi squints and immediately cuts off. The answer is no. He says he will forfeit their match in the second round, and then tell everyone that he is still the Demon King anyway. Linden says that is, of course, a failure, but she immediately steps right into his personal space and she grabs his face and kisses him right on the lips before he can recover. She steps back, waves her hand, and tells him that was a special kiss, so he keeps his tongue behind his teeth. Takumi stands, blushes, and panics. His first kiss was stolen by the real Demon King. Just at that moment, Leia runs in, all disheveled, and joyfully shouts that she won and finally overcame her past. Takumi forces herself to smile, sweats profusely, and tells Leia that she did great out there on the field. Leia choked on her emotions and confessed if she were her former self, she would have already given up. But now, knowing that Takumi has her back, she found the strength to keep going. So, Takumi nervously agrees, all right. And in his thoughts, he apologizes. He definitely didn't look. He was busy with the fact that his first kiss was stolen from him. At that moment, the tournament moves on, and the announcer shouts that the sixth fight of the first round is starting right now. The big screen flashes showing the duel, Rick versus Enda. They are called into the arena. In the corridor, Leia notices that Takumi looks completely exhausted and asks if he is okay. She decides that he is just worn out because he was so passionately cheering for her. Takumi ignores the question and, without unnecessary detours, asks Leia if she has ever kissed anyone. She starts flapping her hands anxiously and denying as if she has never done such a thing, then nervously assumes Takumi, of course, has experience. But Takumi just sits there and stares at the ground, mumbling, no, I haven't had experience, it literally just appeared. Takumi's confession hits them so hard it knocks them off their feet. Leia and Chloe freeze with blank faces, and the air suddenly becomes unbearably heavy. And they instantly click. Leia demands to know if he just kissed someone, and Chloe says she wants to hear about it too. They get right up in his face, with terrifying grimaces, and press him to lay out every single detail of what happened right now. Everything is so furious that the narrator has to ask why the fiercest battle is not happening inside the arena, but outside. The crowd feels the girl's furious rage, and takes it for Takumi's power, trembling in fear and praising the aura of the Demon King. Suddenly, Chloe starts sniffing the air and declares that she has definitely figured out who the mysterious stranger is. And then she shouts that the scent matches the woman with whom the Demon King was, and at that very moment Linden appears behind them. Linden flips his hair and casually teases them, asking why they are making such a fuss over a simple little kiss. Takumi nervously asks why Linden is hanging around their bench, but she doesn't hear him, and because of this everything gets much worse because Leia and Chloe decide that they want kisses too, and even the sword starts screeching that it will join this fun. Chiharu suddenly approaches and calls out Takumi's name, and before he can understand what is happening, she grabs him and plants a kiss right on his face. She holds his cheeks while he blushes deeply, smiles, and says it's okay because she will never let him go. Takumi freezes in shock and lets out a confused groan. While this is happening, the tournament announcer reports. The sixth match somehow ended in a double technical loss even before anyone noticed. Suddenly Chloe bursts into the fight, shouting about her evil dragon dark big fiery bullet ball attack. A powerful explosion from two dragons tears through the arena and rips so hard that the ground trembles. Takumi watches the destruction and admits to himself. Although the battle is incredible, he simply cannot keep up with this power. When the monsters rush through the sky and chaos reigns all around, he decides, whoever wins this clash, he will definitely forfeit his turn. Suddenly Mikey moves closer and casually calls him Demon King, but Takumi immediately tries to stop it and prevent the title from sticking. Mikey crashes right into his face, looks sternly and demands, who is he really? And she tells him that the aura the girl released earlier was definitely from the Demon King. Takumi begins to panic. The lid is about to be blown off and he will be killed like some mafia character. With a trembling voice, he asks what she will do if he turns out not to be the Demon King, and she just scratches the back of her head and says she will do nothing, because it seems the real Demon King needs him now. She decides to pretend she noticed nothing and leaves Takumi in shock. She turns out to be surprisingly calm. In Memories, Meiki says, the Heavenly Kings may rise against humanity again later, but everything depends on the orders of the Demon King. Meanwhile, the announcer disqualifies Chloe from the distance for cheating, and she, standing there in plain sight, just clicks her tongue. The Sword of Karna realizes it has slipped, admits. During the fight, their catch got it when it was transferring power to Chloe. The announcer tries to keep pace until the 8th match between Alice and Jasrek, but everything starts to get out of control. The commentator shouts, since Jasrek withdrew from the match, Alice wins by default. And Takumi suddenly freezes completely. He realizes that the entire first round flew by too quickly. He starts sweating, even in adrenaline, and wonders, is the real Alice really competing seriously in this tournament? And reality hits him hard. The second round is already upon him. He has to fight Linden and he is trembling with fear. The commentator doesn't give him a second to rest and immediately calls out, it's time to start the second fight. Takumi comes out looking as if his nerves are about to snap, and Linden steps forward. A massive, terrible aura rises above her, swirling around like a whirlwind. She adjusts her glasses with a creepy smile and says that it's finally time to begin. And she reveals her dark power, says that she has hidden it long enough, and asks why the Demon King would do this. She demands to know why he made her recognize him as the King of Demons to the point that he kissed her. Takumi realizes he is completely trapped, grabs the bell, and in panic begs Nuragachi to come and save him right now. Before them, the bell rings, instant lithe space twists, and Nurohachi emerges from nowhere. And she immediately stands before Takumi, shielding him, and shouts that she will never let him go again. Chloe and Karna watch from the side completely bewildered, because the arena's protective barrier didn't even react to this intruder. And Takumi freezes, looking at the bell in his hand, and realizes the tournament judges probably think that summoning a person is just equipping a weapon. Linden doesn't look even a bit embarrassed. She adjusts her glasses with a barely noticeable cheeky smile and says that this time it seems they won't get any one-on-one dates. Nuragachi firmly holds her position, apologizes to the secretary but doesn't give Takumi to anyone. And she suddenly becomes too serious. For the second and last time, she asks Linden if she intends to retreat and leave Takumi alone. Linden closes her eyes and surprisingly tells Nuruhachi that she is grateful, admits that without that flower she would have broken long ago. She says that then everything would have been fine if Alice had been saved in time. She wouldn't have done anything, that's all. Even if it was just Nurohachi, then everything would have been okay, but she clings to Takumi and reveals the truth. That man abandoned them both just to go to the mountains and live a quiet life alone. Nurohachi immediately tries to object, starts saying something about Takumi, but Linden cuts her off, saying she already knows everything. She knows. Nurohachi orchestrated this whole situation from the very beginning and even set up the barrier on that mountain to take care of him. She says that Nurohachi threw away everything for this, Alice, Linden herself, and even her own dreams. Takuma stands still completely stunned because now he understands. His expulsion from the party back then was Nurohachi's plan, and she didn't disappear, she was watching him all this time. Linden asks if the sacrifice of everyone for his happiness is what makes Nurohachi happy, and then Nurohachi shouts at her, shut up. The conversation ends. Nurohachi unleashes a giant attack, wave sphere purgatory so. And Linden instantly responds with her own dark magic, a subspace prison. Two explosions collide with furious force. Now it's a full exchange of blows between Nurohachi and Linden. Linden shouts through the magical storm that she always saw everything. She entrusted her dream to Alice and Nurohachi and just wanted to guard the dungeon. And she shouts that she really thought this would be enough for her. She shouts, asking why in 10 years, while she was watching the two of them, there was no progress at all. She looks at the barrier confused and asks Linden what the hell she is really doing. Linden says he will take him if he is not needed. Takumi is blown away by the explosion. Narachi instantly denies this and shouts that she really needs Takumi, but Lin. And Linden just smiles and asks what it means. She behaves as if he is under her care or is she happy just to watch from the sidelines until someone takes him away? Nirahachi grabs an instant strike and immediately jerks with a jump, and shouts that she is completely wrong she suddenly blushes deeply and shouts at the top of her voice that she actually loves Tagumi. Linden adjusts her glasses and says that now she can say it from now on they can finally start. The whole arena explodes with a reaction to the sudden surge of energy, and Takumi just stands still confused. Linden stands with his back to them and says that now they will definitely recreate everything that happened 10 years ago. And Norohachi freezes in fear while Linden tells her that from now on she gives everything she has. Dark magic explodes around Linden, swirling in a spiral into the air while everyone watches and then she raises her gaze and smiles crookedly, adjusting her glasses and asks if it has finally arrived. A giant dragon breaks from the sky and with a furious roar crashes into the arena, throwing up a huge cloud of dust So Chloe finally breaks down and shouts that this is her grandfather, and Leia yells that this is an ancient dragon. Takumi raises his gaze and shudders. He sees someone riding on the back of a dragon and immediately understands who it is. When Linden sees them landing, he declares, "With this, finally, every actor is on stage." The rider jumps off the dragon and lands right in the ruins, with a dramatic entrance. And Takumi trembles with fear when the newcomer notes that her apprentice has become the strongest for humanity, even before she herself realized it. The story recounts the main problem. Takumi is a master with absolutely zero talent, but somehow he was perceived as the strongest guy in the entire universe. And that is why Alice finally appeared. She stands there and smiles as if she just did something grand while birds peacefully soar over the mountains in the distance, the morning is filled with calm. Good morning, Takami sits on the porch with a cup of tea and lets out a huge sigh of relief. He tells himself that his peaceful daily life has finally returned. But then he pauses and admits, in reality it has not fully returned yet. He just decided to pretend that it has. He looks around the landscape and estimates. Even if this piece is just for show, right now everything is not so bad because. Next to him, Nirahachi blushes, Leia smiles, and the narration confirms. Nirahachi has definitely fallen in love with Takumi. As for Alice, in turn, she looked completely exhausted. The days between Leia's arrival and the end of the tournament were too harsh for her. Takumi closes his eyes and clenches his hands, praying with all his might that he will never be dragged into such trouble again. But suddenly someone with mesh marks on their face sharply interrupts. They say they just came to say hello, but ask if they get points for that too. Linden enters with a straight face and explains that just saying hello to him now already costs 5 Takumi points, So Chloe looks clearly irritated by the sudden paywall and asks how many points she actually has now. Linden checks the current score and informs her that she has exactly 4 Takumi points. That statement irritates Chloe even more because she has barely made any progress. She asks if they really only got 2 points for clearing all those weeds in front of the cave. Linden confirms this, explaining, the stakes vary depending on the territory, and she only gets 1 point for every 25 meters she clears. Takumi listens to this and thinks the system is a complete scam but tells himself he needs such high barriers, otherwise he will never be able to relax properly. Chloe decides to check the long-term goal and asks Linden how many points she needs to actually marry Takumi. Linden doesn't even hesitate, he immediately throws out a number. The price for marriage is set, over 5,600,000,000 points. Chloe shouts that she won't earn that much even if she clears the whole world, and Linden adds, after marriage, having children costs another 10 billion. Takumi completely loses his mind at that last part. He can't believe the point system still remains even after they got married. Linden confirms this is simply how pricing works without any exceptions. Takumi listens and even feels relief from such prices. He understands, maybe he can live life in peace because no one will try to touch him. While Takumi hides in the bushes and wonders whether to thank Alice for inventing this scam, Chloe tries to find a bypass. She asks Linden if she can accumulate points by doing useful things for Takumi, and she immediately gets impatient, asks if there is a way to simply earn a huge pile of points at once. Linden explains, for ordinary tasks the maximum payout is only 100 points, but she hints that the system has another side as well. She says there is a hidden challenge that immediately pays 10 billion Takumi points, and asks if Chloe wants to try. Chloe doesn't even hesitate for a second. She gets wildly excited and screams that of course she will do it if such an option even exists. Linden nodded and took out the communication device, saying she would immediately contact Lady Alice to set everything up. So she officially reads out the details of the task. The hidden challenge is to defeat the strongest of the people. She tells Chloe that she only needs to beat Alice in 60 minutes to get 10 billion points, and Chloe immediately freezes. The dragon girl understands that she has 0 chances against the Sword Saint, so she immediately tears away at full speed and shouts that today she will let them go. When the threat disappears, Takumi returns to Layla as if nothing happened and says that it's probably time for them to go harvest rice. Takumi asks about work on the farm, and Leia says she already finished the harvest early in the morning. Maki helped her mow everything down. We see a cat girl who works hard in the fields. It turns out she earned 3 Takumi points, and all these points go directly to the Demon King's account. Takumi becomes serious for a moment, muttering the words Maki, Demon King, and Grand Tournament as if trying to piece together all the puzzles. The scene shifts to the entrance of the arena. Linden stands upright, blocking the way for Takumi, Leia, and Mayaki. Linden admits that winning one-on-one is completely impossible, but she smiles fiercely and announces, "The team battle against Alice begins right now." She strikes a pose and shouts to take everything from the start, and Alice charges a giant energy ball. The narrator says that this moment marked the beginning of the legendary Great Alice War. The attack hits instantly. The explosion destroys the guild headquarters and turns everything within a 2-kilometer radius into scorched wasteland. In the stands there is complete chaos. All the spectators are roasted to a crisp, and every single one ends up with a giant afro. When the smoke clears, Takumi hides in a hole in the wall and quietly calls Leia. Takumi settles down, sips a drink, and asks what Alice has been doing lately. Leia replies she has stepped back from training. She says that after seeing Takumi at the tournament, Alice realized she still lacks strength, although Takumi has no idea why she thinks so. Leia explains that Alice created the Takumi system to keep people away until she becomes strong enough, and Takumi just cuts into the conversation. Now he looks completely confident, but in reality he has zero idea what awaits next. The narrator reveals, within 1 month someone appears who actually managed to score 10 billion points. Karna completely loses her mind as soon as she hears this number and shouts about 10 billion points. She immediately sharply orders Leia to be quiet and calls her a black lizard. She is trembling with fear that Takumi might hear them. Takumi is sitting right here and is drenched in sweat, of course. He heard every word of that loud conversation. Karna still can't calm down and whines. Who could possibly have scored so many points if their team barely scraped together 25? Leah also starts sweating in panic and admits she is far behind. She herself has only 300 points. Leia checks her device and admits, although this usually shouldn't happen, she definitely received a notification from Alice. And immediately Karna demands to say who it is. She is gnawed by the thought, could someone really have passed the hidden challenge? Leia shouted that it's impossible because Alice never loses to anyone except Takumi, and because of this Takumi nervously sweats because he knows for sure he couldn't possibly beat her under any circumstances. He is completely fake. But he basically just can't understand how someone could possibly rack up 10 billion points in such a short time. Lee says that the mysterious guest will come to the cabin today because only there can points be exchanged. And Karna begins to panic because of the prize, shouts about marriage, and regrets not accumulating her own points. But suddenly both girls stop in the middle of the quarrel and turn their gaze into the distance. What they see completely throws them off track. Takumi also sees this and understands this makes sense. If you do exactly this, scoring 10 billion points is realistic. It turned out the guest did not come alone. A whole royal army detachment is marching along the path next to a giant carriage. The chariot rolls forward, and the soldiers march alongside. They notice a flag fluttering in the wind. It is definitely the flag of the Kingdom of Lucia. Takumi finally understands how they managed to score those 10 billion points. They literally mobilized the entire country to do it. He recalls, in Lucia, the population is about 50 million people, so. Then he starts calculating everything in his head. If each person keeps a little every month, the numbers add up. And he realizes this crazy plan is actually feasible. Karna recognizes who it is and calls Leia. She completely freezes, then shouts that it is the princess of the Scythians. And just in time, the carriage comes to a complete stop, and the doors slowly creak open. A shadow emerges from inside. With trembling in their chests, the group watches from afar. Even Takumi had heard rumors about this lady before. They say that in the Kingdom of Lucia, there is a princess who is already nearly 30, but she rejects every marriage proposal that reaches her. She is called the Princess of the Cliff, a nickname that definitely stuck. But this is not just a random name. Its name comes from white lilies that grow only on the steepest and most dangerous cliffs. In the east, these flowers are called yuri, as a symbol of purity and dignity. They say the flower proudly blooms even in the harshest conditions, just like a woman stepping out of a carriage right now. A servant behind the door announces that they have arrived for Lady Celia, and from inside the carriage she thanks Nanison for the hard work. The group secretly peeks from the trees while the story unfolds her past. It turns out many men courted her, but she rejected them all, even princes and supermodels. She steps out as if beyond anyone's power, beautiful like a flower blooming high on a cliff where no one can reach, and that. This is the reason why all the guys she rejected started calling her the Princess of the Abyss. She finally shows her face. This is the real one, Celia Shauna Lucia. Takumi freezes completely. He really recognizes her. Celia is not just a royal person. She is an old party member who saved his life many times back then. She looks straight at him, smiles warmly, and says that it was a long time ago. Here appears the butler Nanison. He steps forward so nothing delays, explaining that Princess Celia came to exchange her Takumi points and wants to sort out the papers immediately. Takumi is a bit confused but agrees and says he will check the points now. Then the butler says, of course, and immediately extends a tray, asking first to look at her T-card. Butler shows the card and it's just insane. On the front side is printed a serious face of Takumi and Nanison presents it as a Takumi point card or T-card for short. He openly admits the idea came to him himself. And he says that this is a standard procedure at home. Every citizen of the Kingdom of Lucia has such a device to manage their Takumi points. Takumi is all sweaty and in panic asks Nanison where he found the time to make something like that. Nanison ignores the panic and notices Leia in the background. She is staring at the card with an expression of utter despair, so he calmly offers to give them one, explaining, T-cards are given to everyone who wants one, not just citizens. Both girls instantly go crazy. Leia begs to be given 3 copies to keep one, and Chloe cuts into the conversation shouting that she also needs 3. While they are in panic, Nanison adjusts his glasses and drops another bomb. Right now the kingdom is holding the Winter Takumi Festival. He explains points can be exchanged for money, but if accumulated during this campaign, special rewards open up and that means. Leia immediately cuts him off, grabs him, and demands to answer what exactly special benefits she can get. Nanison lists the rewards, 10 points for goods, 200 for a year of meat, or all 300 for a gold coin. He notes that 1 coin costs an entire house. Because of this, the point value becomes gigantic, and he names 10 billion points. He asks if she wants to exchange now, because the card he just gave her is actually already loaded with 10 billion points. Leia fiercely tears and unfolds the scroll he hands her, and Nanison says that inside there is also a personal letter from Lady Alice. Chloe loses her head in the background. She goes crazy because the card has 10 billion points and Leia got it first. She shouts that Leia should have been taken earlier, and Nanison calmly, without looking away, makes notes nearby. Takumi leans over and looks at Leia. She is staring at the letter too intently. He asks if she is okay. He notices a name on the paper and immediately breaks out in a sweat. They definitely put out the Goblin King on purpose to mock him and Leia lifts her gaze from the scroll with a serious face, confirming that the information in the letter is absolutely true. Celia smiles at them and asks the main question, what exactly are they going to exchange all these points for? Nanison begins a geography lecture, reminds that there are 5 large countries on the continent and starts with the northern and eastern lands. He points to the Machine City in the south, then mentions the magical kingdom that sits in the west, and finally points to the center, explaining that the largest of them all is the only nation, the central hub of the world where they live. Nanison adjusts his glasses and explains, now the Kingdom of Lucia itself governs everything right in the very epicenter. He adds that dealing with neighbors on all sides, they have managed to keep peace for over 100 years without any major wars. And then he drops bad news. Right now every country from the north, south, east, and west is trying to capture them simultaneously. Takumi completely loses it and shouts, asking if he really means that all countries without exception are attacking them. Nanison says it all started a month ago because of Takumi's legend. Rumors spread. Supposedly he instantly killed leaders and terrified the strongest fighters that exist. Takumi immediately breaks into a sweat and tries to justify himself, awkwardly mumbling that he literally just stood there and did nothing, but Nanison just continues the report and says that while Takumi is in the guild, the world thinks he is just some powerful recluse hiding in a cave. Nanison doesn't stop and insists that the rumor goes, Takumi has no interest in either the guild or ruling any country. Takumi starts sweating because he knows it's true, he just wants to cook food and live quietly. But Nanison explains, that's the problem. Every nation thinks that if they manage to get Lord Takami then they won't just rule the country, they will be able to rule the whole world, so everyone is panicking to reach him. And Nanison reports, all 4 countries are desperate to collect Takumi points somewhere, they are even used as real money. Lee says she wants some of that money for herself, and Takumi has a complete breakdown and asks if he is now literally a currency person. Nanison warns him, at this pace some other country will already carry him away by force tomorrow, so he explains, Lucia gathered these points first to prevent this. Celia steps forward and tells Takumi that there is no choice left. She firmly grabs his hand and starts insisting that he belongs to the Kingdom of Lucia or that in reality, everything is much different and suddenly Takumi remembers a moment from the past. She looks at her smiling face back when Takumi had just spoken about doing the laundry. Leia stands there pure despair, murmuring that her heart is cloudier than the weather. And Celia just smiles and calls her closer, telling Leia that she will teach her how to properly wash clothes. Leia keeps stiffening and getting nervous, asking if she can really do something like that, so Celia tells her that it's normal, she is a girl, therefore she still needs to know how to properly operate the laundry. While Leia starts washing, Celia stands next to Takami and says that Leia actually looks a bit like Alice. Takumi agrees with a smile, admitting that watching her work gives him a strange feeling of nostalgia, and Leia shakes the laundry too hard, asks if the clothes are supposed to be squeezed like that, and Celia shouts that she is literally tearing it to pieces. Takumi just laughs and waves it off, thinking that he finally feels the return of his calm daily life. And the narrator clearly makes it understood. The huge problem with Takumi points is still not solved, not even a bit. And the camera sharply switches to a memory card. It says a few days ago on it. Celia suddenly sharpens, grabs Takumi by the hands and looks intently into his eyes, ordering him to become hers. Before he can come to his senses, she simply pulls him into a tight embrace right before his eyes. Takumi begins to panic and asks if she is really serious, and Celia quietly whispers that they just need to pretend to kiss and hold on to each other for a second. She keeps her voice low and drops a bombshell. Among her subordinates hides an enemy spy. This completely shocks Takumi. Meanwhile, watching this romantic scene from the side, Chloe completely loses it and shouts that she is about to release her final dragon form. Lee gets even worse, muttering something about surrendering in the fight against the gods, and tries to commit seppuku right on the spot, making everyone shout at her to stop. Returning to the main stage, Nanison suddenly strikes a dramatic pose and shouts the move sentence spring bazooka to catch the one who is spying. It turns out to be a ninja from the east with a camera, and while Nanison wants to catch him, Celia tells him, let him go. Celia explains that since they already know who the spy is, they can also figure out who hired him. But Nanison still asks if she really agrees with this. That Takumi just watches everything unfold, completely confused to the edge, and asks if that guy is really the spy she was talking about. Celia looks at the one who was caught and waves him off. She says he is just one of many, and most likely an ordinary low-level spy. And the soldiers behind them begin to panic, completely devastated to the edge, because a spy is hiding among their own ranks. Takumi is still panicking because of the embrace, but Celia tells him to calm down. She will not force a marriage. She just needs the rumors to spread. Supposedly, he belongs to her kingdom and then other countries will retreat. In the end, Celia decided not to spend the accumulated Takumi points to force a wedding, and instead, she spends 100 million points on Dungeon Day passes to send her entire army home, leaving only herself in place. She returns to Takumi and says that she will live with him for some time at least, until she tracks down the real mastermind behind all this mess. Takumi looks confused and asks if she is hinting that someone else is involved, since he was almost sure. The Takumi point system was Alice's idea. And Celia asks if he really believes that Alice is smart enough to assemble a complex anti-fraud system. Takumi immediately agrees. Supposedly, this girl can't even do basic math. Celia points out how suspicious it is. Alice suddenly joined the tournament after a long hiding and asks if he felt anything. Tatsumi admits that he didn't suspect anything at all. She suddenly becomes too serious and warns him. This plan was launched long before the tournament. Someone is definitely using him and Alice for a grand conspiracy. Takumi looks completely exhausted under this pressure. He asks what kind of mess he has been dragged into again and says he just wants to put an end to it right now. Celia completely ignores the mood and unpacks the suitcases. She sees that the bed definitely won't fit there. And then she realizes she forgot to take a toothbrush, so she, as if everything is fine, happily says that she just needs to ask Nanison to send it later. Chloe watches her from the side and asks if this woman is really seriously humming a melody right now, and Leia is simply annoyed by the new guest. She confirms that she hears the buzzing loudly and clearly. Celia happily thinks about where she will sleep tonight, and Leia shouts from behind that she has drawn a hard line, and Celia better not cross it. Takumi dares to ask a serious question. He asks if everything is really fine in her country without the princess, and she just says that everything is fine because she left a replacement. Taki freezes as if under oath and asks what she means by replacement, right? So it is revealed who took the fall for her. It is the new Lucia Hashidal Chilt, and the text explains that in fact she is the first-generation queen of the kingdom of Lucia. The scene begins with a memory of the witch lady. She says that the number of party members needs to be increased. The story rewinds 10 years back to explain how this whole nightmare started. Takumi explains, Nuruhachi, who is the highest in rank, forced the guild to pass him, but no one wanted to join a team with someone expelled like him. He says that usually ranks stop at E, but because he was so bad, they created a special rank F below all just for him. He understood no one would ever want such a useless guy in the squad, so from the very beginning he was completely cornered. But Nuruhachi intervened and saved him. She said she would join his squad herself, casually keeping in sight a quest with triple difficulty level. Having knocked down a huge dragon to the ground, she muttered that it was much weaker than she thought. She realized she herself would not be able to protect him. Returning to the present, Takumi asks the new Lucia why Nuruhachi even came to the Lucian royal castle. But she does not go into details and simply moves on, orders him to speed up and asks what is wrong. Takumi suddenly stops. He points to the painting on the wall and says that it is definitely an image of Nuruhachi. Takumi glances at the portrait on the wall signed as the first queen, Nu Lucha Hashitel, and he turns to the current queen to ask if that woman was really the first ruler of this country. So the new Lucia corrects him with a self-satisfied smile. She says, technically the first queen destroyed the original kingdom of Lucia and simply took its place. The story shifts to a memory. Someone solemnly greets her, calling her by her full royal name, but Nuruhachi cuts all that off immediately. She tells the one bowing on the floor, just call me Nuruhachi because she hates such wooden ceremony. In the throne room, the queen of that time agrees to renounce her titles and asks what business brought her here today. Nuruhachi smiles, frowns, and says that she came to look for party participants more precisely, people who can flawlessly hold defense, heal, and detect crises. The queen looks confused and points out that Nuruhachi is so powerful that he doesn't need any such help, but now in the present Takumi realizes the truth. She didn't need those roles for herself. She took them to protect him. We see Rick, the commander of the Knights, standing next to Sasha the healer, and this proves she gave her all to recruit the best in the entire kingdom for Takumi. Nuruhachi names specific people she wants, starting with Priestess Sasha and she also demands the great villain Betts, who joins the ranks. She turns to the queen and checks their stats once again. She needs to know if they specialize in defense, recovery, and danger detection, asks if a trial run is needed. The queen confirms that everything is ready, so Nuruhachi decides right here and now. She takes these three with her. Returning to the present, Sasha smiles and says that it brings back memories. It turns out that after all that chaos, she was still sent to a monastery. Then Takumi listens to her story, admitting, earlier he had no idea that Sasha was actually the queen's daughter. But suddenly he realized someone from the group is missing and asks where Rick is. It turns out that he is just about to appear. Celia's face suddenly pales, and she tells him that Rick won't come and can't because he disappeared since the tournament ended. Takumi freezes in shock at these words. She says that she kept Rick on a special secret mission for a long time. His task was to watch Takumi and Alice to check if anyone suspicious was sneaking up on them. And now the one who was supposed to watch over everything has disappeared without a trace, as if he had sunk into the ground. Takumi suddenly becomes worried after hearing about Rick's disappearance, so he asks if there is anything he can do to help. Celia only smiles in response and says that everything is fine, he just needs to stay here and flirt with her. And she explains, if rumors spread that she is marrying Takumi, the helmsman will definitely show up to see it personally. Takumi instantly notices a huge problem. From his own ally Leia comes a terrible intent to kill So. And he starts sweating, realizing that even as an adventurer, he has never had to take on a quest of such complexity. Later, a huge roast chicken is placed on the table, and it is completely stuffed with hot rice steaming. Leia looks at the dish in complete shocked silence and asks what it is, pointing to the fact that the bird is stuffed with rice. So Celia laughs as if memories of adventurous days are returning to her again. Takumi always cooked this for her after a big quest. Leia's mood instantly darkens, and she mutters that he definitely didn't do anything special when she arrived. Takumi panics and tries to explain that this is wrong, but then the rice simply wasn't ready for harvest yet. Lee is not going to give up nostalgic conversations, so she loudly insists. Takumi was extremely popular even in her time when she was with him. Late that night in the bedroom, Lee looks at the schedule and complains that her place is noticeably farther from Takumi than yesterday. She accuses Celia of staring directly at Takumi's face last night while he was sleeping, and declares that she will not allow such a distance again. Celia looks completely unfazed and immediately retorts. She asks what he is talking about because it was Lee who literally watched him from zero distance up close. And she smugly points out that regardless of who was watching, Takumi was definitely sleeping all that time facing her side. Leo instantly comes up with a desperate excuse. On the spot he claims that Takumi shows the back of his head precisely to those he truly holds in his heart. Takumi twitches inside with panic. He is sure that he cannot have such a strange habit during sleep. The girls get right up in each other's faces to argue about boundaries. Celia tells her not to cross the line, but Lesia shouts that Celia is stealing an extra 2 cm. Celia sharply rejects this. Lee must stop playing games after all, she is actually closer now. So then she suggests swapping places if there are so many complaints. Lee refuses instantly. She says she has a duty to protect Takumi from strangers exactly where she is now. The girls instantly panic. The beds have now been moved even farther apart. And Lee complains that he is behaving rudely, but Takami sharply stops her. He says that this distance is their punishment for fighting. Late that night, Takumi suddenly sits up in bed completely shattered but wide awake. He just can't fall asleep. So he goes out onto the street, remembering how once Leia and the rest used to gather in a crowd near his place, to the point system. It was not only them, Rick, and even the hero all of them burst into his place and stayed with him a month before the tournament. He misses those days, but he must guess who pulled the strings and what they really planned. He is running through Takumi points and the places that are missing in his head. Rick Sasha warned that someone is using Alice, and that. And this leads to the system itself. He looked into it, but the entire structure is incredibly complex and gigantic. Sasha kept saying it was just magic, but he knows better. Behind the spells hide real surveillance devices. Not a single person built this alone. It seems entire nations united to create this crazy city. He believes that this high-tech surveillance system is from South City, where science is at an incredibly advanced level. And looking back at the past month, he realizes those Takumi points actually protected him. He does not feel any malice in the one who assembled the system. Honestly, it did not look evil at all. Suddenly, he feels warm and nostalgic for some reason, and then he hears a sound nearby. A terrifying man with a bowl haircut steps out of the shadows together with Maskana and casually says, "Good evening." He introduces himself as Dr. Deus, and says he cracked the backdoor password just to come and test Takumi's strength. He complains that Maskana didn't bring enough intel from the tournament, so he had to come himself. Takumi freezes in place and asks if he really came to test him, and what the story is with that password. Only then does it dawn on him. Maskana was fighting for a reason. She was watching him all along. Deus doesn't give him a moment to think. He orders Maskana to start the experiment right now. Maskana activates her combat system, announces that slaughter mode is starting, and declares she is ready to fight. Then she releases a barely noticeable flash and Deus is very impressed. Takumi didn't move for a moment. He thinks Takumi understood it was just an intimidation tactic. Takumi suddenly turns around and trembles, but the truth is much worse. He screams inside himself he didn't move because he physically didn't have time to react. Deus relentlessly analyzes him in his thoughts, insisting that Takumi can definitely destroy Maskana instantly, but he himself asks, is he holding back precisely because he noticed the secret? Takumi sweats bullets, frozen in a frozen smile, and thinks that he definitely can't destroy anything, but honestly didn't notice a single detail. Just then Deus drops a bomb, literally revealing that Maskana is packed with explosives enough to wipe an entire mountain off the face of the earth. And Takumi just screams. He stands as if stunned by shock and dust settles around, but Deus ignores the reaction and says Maskana should really take aim this time because he wants to see the strongest moves. Machina replies coldly, "Yes, doctor," and immediately starts tearing space with fire from the cannon arm. Takumi rushes, saving his skin. But Deus completely misunderstands his actions in his files. He records that Takumi's weak aura is a brilliant strategy to throw off enemy vigilance. Takumi hid behind a rock, and even the narrator notes. His evasion skills are pathetic, E-rank level literally. He breaks out in a scream, tears in his eyes. He does not boast and does not hold back. He is simply really weak, but Deus ignores the pleas and orders Maskana to shoot that rock with a rocket launcher to test its defense. So Maskana simply says Roger and activates something called Grand Slaughter Mode, as if nothing special. Takumi realizes, that's it, serious trouble. He alone won't handle these guys anymore, but just then he notices a familiar chime appearing right in the air and hopes that it means Nuru Hachi is teleporting to save him. Deus immediately notices the magic and smiles, wondering if the great sage's teleportation can really break his system. Suddenly a warning flashes on the digital display, intrusion confirmed. This throws Takumi off balance. And the system announces the launch of anti-intruder protocols right before the confused face. The computer completes the analysis of teleportation magic and immediately performs a reverse transfer to stop it. The system confirms the alien has been eliminated. Deus announces victory over Nero Hachi, and then Takumi screams in panic because the machine immediately loads the anti-tank bazooka and starts the countdown from 5 to complete the operation. And it screams towards the fire and launches a rocket that causes a terrible explosion right where Takumi is standing. Takumi checks himself and realizes he is somehow still not dead. Then he feels a hand on his head and raises his gaze. Kama appears in human form with a big smile and tells him that she made him wait, because of which makes Dr. Deus completely lose control of himself. He screams that this is impossible, because his system did not record any summoning at all. He starts babbling nonsense about action memos, guessing whether this is non-spell magic or some high-level jamming. And he screams that this is a lie because even the god creator would not have the ability to bypass his security system. Takumi simply looks at the dragon girl and matter-of-factly explains that he actually did not call her. And he tells Deus the simple truth. She was with him inside the sword from the very beginning. Takumi simply calls Karna's name while she stands there protecting him, and Dr. Deus completely loses his mind. He shouts, "Attack him, not me," demanding to know what he is and accuses him as if he is some entity overturning all science. Karna smiles and whispers to Takumi, just have him say his usual line so. Takumi puts on a confident expression and tells the doctor that he has perfectly figured everything out, admitting absolutely everything. Deus panics and checks the data. She is a black dragon and there are no records of any previous contact in any journal, so this is. He comes to a terrible conclusion. He shouts that it was not any bridge but that Takumi created it from scratch. He shouts that Takumi instantly created the dragon and asks if the rumors about his father, the creator of gods, are true. Tatsumi just exhales through his teeth and thinks that his father is literally an ordinary man who runs a snack bar, but Deus has no choice. He grits his teeth and orders Mascara to first target the dragon woman. And Machina immediately confirms the order, preparing to fire from every weapon she has. Machina unleashes a barrage of massive energy shots at them, and Karna covers everything with a dark absorption sphere easily, without any effort. She smiles predatory and asks if this is all she has, declaring, "Time for punishment." Deus shouts that she is insolent, so Mascara lunged forward with a prepared beam saber. Karna does not miss a beat and calls her evil dragon dark greatsword. But Mascara understands that she needs more power, so she decides to open her limiter. Takumi feels a sharp surge of energy and shouts Karna's name, completely panicking. She smiles and tells Takumi not to worry, she has to match their efforts. Machina goes full throttle and activates limit break in Ragnarok mode, thus Karna immediately raises her evil dragon heavy shield. The clash of Karna and Machina causes a giant explosion, and although everything looks extremely harsh, here Takumi watches as his land is destroyed and complains. His property is being completely torn apart right now. He shifts his gaze to the scientist and says to Dr. Deus, staying alone with him was probably not in the plans, so he better lay out everything he knows. Deus begins to tremble with fear and begs, is the strongest in the universe really going to use force? He will plead to stop, a single strike will be fatal. Takumi stares at him and understands something incredible. This guy is of the same breed as him. Noticing an ant on the ground, Takumi confirms. The doctor is actually also on the absolute weakest side of humanity. When Takumi realizes that he can really win this fight, a surge of confidence bursts out of him and he shouts that he is coming after him. Deus lets out a pathetic screech and covers his head in horror like this. Takuma abruptly jumps into the fight and unleashes a flurry of quick strikes. More precisely, he starts flailing his arms at that guy like a toddler. Deus constantly twitches and shouts, "Ow," but suddenly freezes in the middle of the orgy. He asks why it actually hardly hurts. Takumi's weak blows made Deus draw a completely wrong conclusion. He adds a new note to the file and marks that Takumi supposedly pushes his physical abilities to the limit only to avoid killing a weak opponent. Deus nervously sweats inside his barrier limit and runs through the thought. He needs to correct previous notes that Takumi cannot restrain himself because, you see, this level of control is from another league, so he decides to catch this mood. Deus shouts that if Takumi is like that, he will give everything he has in this fight. They enter the fight essentially, weakly slapping each other's hands. Takumi tells the doctor that he is holding his own but does not intend to lose, and Deus pulls his hands back and rages, shouting that he will never lose. But while these two arrange their pathetic petty fight, the real heavyweights are already making their move. Karna at that moment reveals her evil dragon dark great flame, just as the fire machine discharges her omnidirectional slaughter machine. And the difference in strength is so ridiculous because the collision causes a gigantic explosion that instantly throws Takumi and Deus from their spots. Both are flung away like dolls, completely breaking their sad duel. After being hit and falling to the ground, Deus gets up, gasping hoarsely for air. He is completely exhausted. He tells Takumi that he can no longer physically continue and suggests simply settling things with rock, paper, scissors. Takumi bends over in agony, gasping for air, and immediately agrees that the doctor has a great idea. They come together once more, for the last time. They shout the starting words and lower their hands just to find out who will finally take the victory. The game of rock, paper, scissors finally ends. Deus falls to the ground, admitting defeat, while Takumi throws his fist up, celebrating the victory. After the battle, which passed peacefully, they switch to food, serving a plate of perfectly fried rice balls. Deus takes one bite and is immediately twisted by shock. He asks what it is, not understanding how rice shaped into a triangle and grilled results in such a crispy and flavorful dish. Takumi does not slow down. Holding a cauldron, he tells the doctor that if he puts the rice into a bowl and pours broth over it, it will have a completely different taste. Deus looks as if his mind has just been blown. He shouts that it is a wonderful idea and that he has never seen such advanced cooking in his life. While the doctor is distracted by the food, Takumi shakes his hand and asks him to immediately stop the investigation. They have already agreed. And Deus agrees to step back. He admits that retreating is painful, but understands that with his current abilities, he still cannot measure Takumi's strength. As the enemies withdraw, Karna waves friendly to the cyborg and tells Machina that she can return for a revenge match anytime she wants. Machina pauses and looks around. She warns, next time she will challenge them with her true self, her real I, so she. And she disappears along with the doctor. Leaving Karna, he nudges Takumi in the shoulder to get his attention while the path is clear. Kari suddenly becomes a bit worried. She tells Takumi that in human form she can only hold on for a little longer so. Takumi stands by the cave looking confused, asks if the seal when she left earlier was not completely broken but she admits that this is not the case. In fact, right now she is chasing power too hard to appear in this form. She says if she relaxes even for a moment, everything will revert so since the tournament she has been sleeping to not waste energy. And Takumi immediately understands why she was so unfocused and unresponsive before. Takumi stands and listens while Karna teases him, asking if he has been too lonely without her all this time. He asks if the accumulated power will be enough to finally break the seal forever and Karna admits, she once thought so too, but it turns out she was wrong. She abruptly moves to explanations. Her desire to help left only a small hole in the seal, but to break it completely something specific is needed. And she suddenly grabs Takumi by the shirt and shouts right in his face that she thinks, it is the power of love. She closes her eyes and pushes her lips forward, insisting that if she falls in mutual love with a handsome prince and they share a kiss, the seal will definitely break. But Takumi just laughs cheerfully and tells her straight to her face that he really hopes she will find such a partner someday, and meanwhile fully moves her into just friends. Karna begins to fade and admits that full recovery will take a long time. Then she asks Takumi to send greetings to Chloe on her behalf. Takumi watches her disappear and gives her a sincere smile thanking her for saving his life there. And he decides to be honest for once admitting that he really feels a bit lonely when they couldn't talk to each other. Karna's voice now echoes from the sword. It says that nothing can be done and that she will just have to be patient with him and the scene changes. Meanwhile, Dr. Deo sits at the computer and mutters that he doesn't care who wins the tournament. His only mission is to get the combat data. The machine runs through its situation in its head and explains. Maintaining a mechanical body is a whole fortune, so whenever she could, she took on high-paying jobs. She clenches a data chip in her hand and admits to herself. She will do the job at any cost, even if it will actually be dirty. And Deus is glued to his screen and shows. Of all the tournament participants, only 2 data files really matter. He pulls up files on Takumi and Alice. Alice looks like a warrior, and Takumi as if he is about to lose control right now. And in Diwoo's notes it is stated, compared to all other fighters, the market price of data on these 2 mysterious eccentrics is beyond any forecasts. Deus says he is recording right now. The final battle of this great tournament will be his last chance to collect detailed data. Suddenly the arena. Miek shouts that she is rushing forward and finishes everything with a loud meow. And Deus pulls up her file, determines that she is a demoness of the cat type and Beast King Mikes, and prepares to count the numbers. He reviews the combat power rating of Mayaki, based on data from her recent battles with Zaha and Dagon. And the results are impressive. Her strength and speed are immediately rated as top-class S rank. Scrolling through the list, he notes endurance at A and magic at B, but her special ability is rated as double S, which leads to the final summary where Deus gives her an overall S rank rating. Then the focus shifts to Alice. She barely makes an effort, just casually sends the monster back with a light backhand as if it's nothing. The beast flies forward across the arena and crashes straight into the stone wall, shattering the wall on impact hand L. In complete shock, as Linden freezes and asks if she is really that strong, the data confirms. Alice's combat power continues to grow infinitely. Deus reviews the battlefield data and sees that Alice's strength overwhelmingly dominates, causing other demons to panic. But what shocks him the most is something else. He sees a man standing right on the stage, remaining completely calm as if nothing happened. Tatsumi reaches out and gently strokes Alice's head, creating the legendary sword of the saint as if it were a child, and Deus watches as the reading level rises. He notices she instantly defeated 4 heavenly kings, but now her pulse is wildly racing. Alice blushes and shakes, but Deus completely misreads the data. He decides that she is panicking because she knows she cannot defeat Takumi. Mashina also begins to panic. She understands this is impossible, and if she scans this guy any deeper, she will be killed. So she raises her gaze to Tatsumi, but her fear makes him look like a shadowy monster looks through her. In her head, a frightening voice confirms her fears. Supposedly, she understood everything and is exactly right. Her system crashes instantly, audio logs are corrupted, she thinks she is hallucinating and the data just flashes unknown. She decides that today she is not ready to die, so she sharply turns and runs as if for her life while her sensors continuously fail. While Maskina flees, her internal systems go out of control and spiral wildly. She fixates on cutting out the disgusting human parts left in her body and erase all these dirty emotions, because her only remaining desire is to become an absolutely perfect mechanism without any humanity that would restrain her. Takumi watches her walk away, having no idea what she is thinking. He just stands there wondering if she will be okay running around here in a dangerous battlefield. Suddenly, Chloe approaches him closely and meets his gaze serious and asks if it is true that her sister Karna's seal was actually broken. Takumi explains that she is now inside the sword again, but Yesh was just briefly revived. and he asks why she mentions it. Chloe relaxes a little and says that her grandfather, an ancient dragon, told her the seal is beginning to break. She says that it's a pity she didn't manage to see her sister, and sends greetings to Kuchin from Grandpa, and Takumi only politely nods in response. Then Takumi casually drops a bomb. He says, the great-grandfather mentioned that the only way to break the seal is not through force, but through love. Chloe instantly blushes to a dazzling degree and starts stammering about love, completely confused, while Celia watches them from behind. Yes, Celia suddenly grabs Takumi with a huge smile and laughs, praising that it sounds so cool, and says she always dreamed of a guy who would take her away after her retirement. Celia fully indulges in her fantasy. She shouts that she wants him to kidnap her while she dominates the entire dragon clan, and she starts blushing deeply, saying that a true gentleman wouldn't even enter the royal palace because he would understand true happiness is right here, to live forever together with his beloved apprentice, not going anywhere else. But Chloe doesn't buy it. She shouts that Celia's idea is pure zero drama and insists the true purpose is to stick together while the world tries to tear you apart. Even Karna raises her voice from the sword to support Chloe, stating that forbidden love is definitely the classic path, so she teases Takumi, saying he's just as popular with girls as before. Then she says she likes the trope where the girl is captured by bad boys, and during the rescue she falls in love and asks Takumi what his type is. Takumi looks completely exhausted and admits that he actually doesn't know how to do all that romance stuff. And then he says that he likes it when two people live one life without ever realizing that they like each other. Karna bursts out, shouting that love doesn't start like that. Takumi simply steps aside while the girls fight in the background, and thinks, until very recently he was just trying to survive, he had no time to think about loving someone. Karna says that sounds just like him, but she asks, what will he do if he realizes his feelings just before death? Takumi nods a little awkwardly and says he doesn't know until that moment comes. And he raises his eyes to the sky and smiles fiercely, admitting that he will probably just pretend he didn't notice at all. Krishna immediately yells at him, stop, trying to pass it off as some cool story, although in reality it's not okay at all. Takumi gets back to work and says, if they don't find the spy watching them, he won't know when he can stop this fake marriage. Celia notices her chance and slyly asks if it wouldn't be better for them to just get married for real. And in the background, Chloe and Leo cause a complete commotion. Celia laughs and says it's a joke but admits she has a plan. She calls the detection specialist the one who can find anyone, no matter how well they hide. When someone approaches, she explains, this man is not from Lucia Kingdom, but he is exactly the one she trusts unconditionally. They start guessing if it's Sasha appearing. It is Rick who steps forward, waves his hand, and tells the two of them that quite some time has passed. Celia lights up with a huge smile as soon as she sees who it is, and it turns out to be the great thief Batsu, the man who joined her party at Nero Hatch 10 years ago instead of taking a share. And although his talk is all crap, when things get tough he never gives up, more reliable than anyone. Celia says she is really very happy that he managed to get here, but Batsu just brushes off all the formality, teasing her, saying now she looks a bit older and more sexy. Then he laughs loudly and straightforwardly asks if he and Takumi have already slept together. Both Celia and Takumi immediately scream, saying they definitely haven't done anything like that. Batsu switches to a business tone, says he has grasped the essence of the situation and asks where they want to start. And Celia says they first need to find the spy who is watching them, but Batsu reveals he has already noticed 3 on the way, and he already has one in the cart on his shoulder. Takumi and Karna just stand still, jaws dropped, completely stunned. The spy who lunged at her grabbed the girl with short dark hair, and she is kneeling completely tied up. And she continues to rebel, shouting that she won't talk even if they kill her. And Batsu calmly says he only needs the employer's name. While Takumi looks at his clothes and realizes that he dressed exactly like Yoro, that ninja from 10 Greats. So Batsu cuts in, saying the details don't matter because he already figured out who the real mastermind is. Takumi asks in shock who it is, but Batsu doesn't even pay attention to that. He just says they will now catch the rest of the squad. He points his hand into the distance and announces that 2 others are coming from there. It seems they finally arrived. Suddenly voices scream piercingly. Sister Hiro and Sister Yoro and their footsteps thunder ahead fast without stopping. 2 figures burst onto the scene with crazy speed, and one of them is definitely the high-ranking adventurer Yoro. Batsu doesn't even flinch. He grabs the ropes and intercepts 2 attackers in midair even before they manage to hit. He strikes them with an instant capture, leaving them hanging on the trees and shouting that this is impossible. Batsu casts a condescending look at the prisoners and boasts how quickly it happened, because he told them so. The ninja guy can't believe it. He mutters that it's impossible, no ordinary person can so easily catch their stealthy movement. Batsu waved it off and admitted he didn't see or feel them at all. He just uses a different method of capture. So then he explains everything depends on adaptability. You reorient your gaze and notice what is usually hidden from the eyes. The captivated ninja suddenly understood something and asks if that is exactly how Batsu figured out the true identity of that person. Batsu confirms this, saying he was going to tell Takumi everything as soon as they were caught, hence the big revelation. But a voice cuts into the conversation and says that this is a problem. Batsu just smiles at the threat and says sorry, but it's impossible, he has already made a promise to his friends. Suddenly, the captivated Yoru, stripped to the bone, slipped out of the ropes and flew away. Her sister Asaz shouts about her shamelessness, but Yoru just orders her to shut up. Celia instantly panics and covers Takumi's eyes with her palms, saying he must not look at a naked woman. Batsu watches as Yoru flies away and shouts at full volume that now that she has escaped, the condition of being captured no longer counts. Yoru hovers above him, completely naked, and asks him if he can wait before revealing her secret and Batsu apologizes for making her show off her sexy figure but says she will be caught again soon anyway. She ignores the mockery and asks if he can promise to stay silent until she is actually caught and he simply breaks into a smile right there on the spot, as if he finds the whole situation quite funny. Batsu says that is interesting and agrees to stay silent until she is caught again. Yoru says she appreciates the agreement and tears into the sky completely naked. Inside, Leia panics and shouts. She asks why she should even be here and why she eats Tatsumi's food as if it's nothing. Asad simply calls her a traitor and asks if it's not time for her to be in place and give her sister a good beating. She explains that she was released only on the condition she won't run away and won't cause a scene. Encarna sits right next to her and tells this sad one to just shut up and finally finish her food. Asa stuffs his mouth with food and tells him that he will forgive him today because it's so delicious. Alright, Takumi turns to the boy with the headband and asks what's going on with Batsutsu. So Celia stands up and explains that Rick rushed after the spy. She notes that Batsu hasn't changed at all. She warns them that they are too careless. Yuru's rank is 7 in the guild, so she won't be caught so easily. Takuma intervenes and says, Batsu is a criminal, so the guild won't accept him, but if he could, he would be top-ranked. And he thinks to himself, he definitely knows what Batsu is capable of. This guy sails through any difficulty as if it doesn't exist. Batsu, grinning, scratched the back of his head and apologized, admitting that he actually let her go. Such a voice hardens and asks Batsu who is behind all this, the mastermind. Batsu laughs out loud and says, that man will definitely come to her aid, so they will just take the boss. Suddenly, a voice comes from the road. Someone says, it has been a long time since they ate takumeshi. Takumi suddenly exclaims, as if he has just seen the light. He asks himself if he really just picked up another freeloader and Batsu introduces himself to the new girl. He says he is an old friend of Takumi and confirms this is Leia, a student of both Alice and Takumi. Leia smiles politely, introduces herself, and then confirms she has already left Master Alice and is now studying under Takami. So Tatsu tells her that becoming Takumi's apprentice is the right decision. He notes that she somewhat resembles Alice, so she will definitely learn a lot from him. Leia looks truly happy when she hears this, and with a big smile thanks Master Batsu for such kind words. Takumi watches from the side and sees. At first, Leia tried to fit in with Chloe and Sasha's group, but with Batsu she immediately clicks. He smiles to himself, thinking that this ability to get along with people is probably another one of Batsu's talents. Batsu finishes eating and stands up, full, so it's really time to get to the goal, but returning to the prisoners, little girl Asa asks her sister Guru if they are not being completely underestimated right now. Guru tells Asa not to worry, their older sister Yoru will not lose to guys of this level. High in the mountains, Riku stands alone and admits the enemy is truly impressive. As warned, he has completely lost her location. Rick combs through the mountains and wonders if the target has returned home, and suddenly. But then he realizes she won't go because she needs those points, so she is somewhere nearby hiding close. He looks around confused no matter how hard he tries to concentrate. In this area, he only senses wild animals. Returning to base, Kuro explains what is happening. This is a special technique, beast transformation, right? And she reveals that she and Yoru were actually abandoned in a wolf pack as children to learn to live like beasts. She adds, because of this training, if you just look for human presence, you will never be able to distinguish Yoru from an ordinary animal. Takumi starts sobbing as soon as he hears about their traumatic childhood and immediately vows. Tonight he will prepare a huge feast for them to make up for everything. Lee steps forward and immediately volunteers to search. She knows the beast technique, so she tells Batsu and Sasha to take security and she sets off herself. Batsu watches her leave and notes that she is honest and straightforward in everything. And he immediately turns to Takumi with a smile and asks if he has already made a move on her. Leia completely loses her temper and shouts that she did nothing and even starts fiercely defending herself over the joke. But Batsu simply ignores her and says he will set traps near the entrance. He orders Sasha to watch the prisoners, so Takumi and Sasha turn around and panic immediately overwhelms them. The trail of the two girls has already gone cold. Someone shouts, asks if Yoro has returned to save them. And Rick looks at the empty room and says, "No way, not even with stealth. No one is capable of hiding their presence that well." He understands this was not a simple job done by three sisters alone. And Rick explains that from the very beginning there were four of them, although he only knew about one. He looks stern and says, "The real brain is the one who came to take this upon himself." Rick adds that this is not just hiding presence, this man actually completely erases his own existence. And the group stands outside, looking confused, not understanding how someone could pull this off, especially while carrying Satan Huru. Rick names the legendary Hades helm a helmet that can erase from existence the one who wears it and everyone he touches. Leia in shock repeats the name, clearly realizing how terrible it sounds, and Rick explains, "This is magical equipment like Tatsumi's sword, but this helmet is at a mythical level of rarity which should not even exist." Takumi starts sweating and asks if the mastermind really has equipment that, in theory, is impossible to obtain. Lee turns to her tracker and asks Batsu how they can find a person who is completely invisible, so how. So Batsu admits, for them it is impossible, but says they still have one card left to play. Takumi panics and immediately points to himself, and asks if he has some hidden power he doesn't know about, but Batsu points to the bell on Takumi's collar and says, no, they have to use exactly that to summon him, although he hates that guy. But before they can try, a voice bursts in, too bad already. Dr. Deus has already set up a barrier to block teleportation. And the voice adds, the barrier will disappear in a few days, but right now that bell is absolutely useless. Celia says she is not worried about leaving her position because she has completely handed over the security of Lucius' kingdom to Nero Hatch, and adds that it was the only choice. If Nero Hatch had not been on guard, the main plan would have already taken over the country. But suddenly someone approaches and interrupts them, saying it seems the summoning bell is no longer needed for them. Nanison immediately recognizes Nero Hatchai standing there and starts screaming. What the hell happened to the kingdom she was supposed to watch over? Niruhachi carelessly replies that they blamed everything on Nanison, even though he cried about it and it doesn't make sense at all, because he is standing right here beside them. She immediately starts screaming and asks what else she was supposed to do if the main conspirator has not yet been caught, and the kingdom is under threat. So she tries to explain she was trying to teleport to Takumi, but her magic was completely blocked by some obstacles. And she shouts that any enemy strong enough to stop her must be a huge threat, so she rushed there to help. Takumi awkwardly laughs and says that's great. Now all that's left is for Rick and Alice to show up and the whole company will be together. But Rick is literally standing right nearby, all sweaty, and he wonders if Takumi is blind, or just pretending not to notice for some deeper reason. Batsu points to the dark entrance to the cave in the rock, but Takumi just looks confused and asks what exactly he is talking about. The thief notices Takumi and Sasha probably erased this place from their memory completely. Overall, not a bad hideout. And he decides that it doesn't matter because he will fix everything as soon as they capture the targets, so he just checks with Niruhachi on the go. Niruhachi looks closely at him, and indeed it's Batsu, still with the same villainous face, then tells him to learn from the cuteness of Takami. Batsu ignores the insult, just smiles crookedly and asks if she confessed at the tournament and most importantly, if she really pulled that off with Takumi. Niruhachi and Celia immediately go crazy, loudly shouting that they definitely did nothing. But Batsu doesn't stop muttering that Takumi is a coward because he still hasn't made a single move toward all the girls gathered here, and adds, if it were him, he would take them all. Suddenly, a terrifying voice sounded right next to his ear. It said that a lot of time has passed, but it seems his final farewell is happening right now. He instantly falls to his knees and bows his head, stubbornly apologizing that he got carried away and begs her to forgive him. So he quickly gets up, changes the subject, and asks what the real situation is, because it seems they are not being attacked. Batsu immediately corrects the record. Actually, it's the opposite. The one they caught escaped because they used the Hades helmet. Niruhachi freezes in place. She asks again what he just said and thinks that the guy was the only one who has the Hades helmet. She turns away and raises her hand, realizing aloud, if the helmet is here, then it almost certainly means exactly what she thinks. Takumi watches her reaction from behind and wonders if Niruhachi also really knows the owner of this mysterious helmet. Niruhachi wastes no time and rushes into attack, shouting that she is casting an omnidirectional detection spell, but the effect lasts only 5 minutes. Batsu retreats and tells her that there is already enough time, she just needs to do it. And a huge spell wavesphere search rises, tearing forward, sending magical waves across the entire landscape to find its target. Batsu immediately grins, he hit the mark. He glances at a pair of feet armored in boots standing in the shadows and says, now he sees they were hiding right here all this time. Takumi and Celia squint, looking into the distance, trying to see what he found, and both completely lose control. Really, is the only thing they can think. Celia intently watches the armored figure before her and finally understands who it is. She calls out the name Rick in shock. Her thoughts race and she realizes Rick probably planned something colossal even before the grand tournament, involving Takumi and Alice Way just as Sasha had warned her. Takumi also begins to piece the picture together. He recalls how it was when they first met as adventurers. Rick, who always remained calm, behaved very strangely, trembling and confused just from seeing him. He stares at the armor behind his friends' backs and asks if this has been going on from the very beginning. And then he completely breaks down, shouting at Rick and demanding to know if he has been lying to the whole company since day one. Rick doesn't even try to hide it. He simply tells Takumi that he has figured everything out and confirms he is absolutely right. Suddenly, everything starts to shift. Takumi realizes he is literally being sucked into a sequence of flashbacks, and he falls screaming wildly through the dark abyss of memories and lands right in the past. He lands in a memory where a woman orders Rick to introduce himself to the group. So Rick sits at the table and introduces himself, clearly stating that he is the captain knight of the Kingdom of Lucia. In the memories, young Takumi introduces himself as a novice who wants to become great someday, and Sasha smiles and says she will take full responsibility for supporting the treatment. Batsu jumps forward, says he came only for the money but will help them if necessary. Return to reality. Chloe looks at the visual in amazement and calls Takumi, "Is this really a flashback?" Because the picture is incredibly clear. And she says that now she feels a much stronger connection with him than before. Takumi looks a bit confused and simply asks if that's really the case. He starts grumbling about the settings. He knows they are interested in Rick's betrayal, but watching his shameful past in high resolution is pure embarrassment. He understands. This is one of those classic tropes where a long flashback actually takes zero time and agrees that this is definitely what's happening. Chloe raises her eyes to the screen and asks if she can add some comments while they watch. Rick nods from below, as if to say it's all right, so let her speak. Head goes into battle, and the flashback officially starts again, now with unprecedented live commentary from the viewers. In memory, the master leader decides, since all spots in the squad are taken, they must immediately set off and challenge the S-rank quest. Young Takumi immediately panics. He asks fearfully if starting with an S-rank might be a bit too risky for them. Panic still rumbles in memory. Takumi points out that their last AA air rank run was a complete failure, so he truly doubts they will survive the legendary S-class quest. Necrucatch remains completely calm, telling him not to worry. She insists that the three of them are actually quite talented, so there is no reason to fear the S-rank but this. The task letter trembles and falls on the table and opens. Their goal is to conquer Emperor Behemoth. This is a huge deal. Batsu glances at the request and immediately stops it, declaring, "This is simply impossible." Sasha agrees that it is completely reckless, and Takumi only shouts about how worried he is, but that's not the whole story because in reality, Chloe returns to Takumi and asks why Nero Hachai kept dragging these crazy, senselessly unjustified tasks all the time. Tatsumi admits he didn't understand it then, but now he knows she was cultivating magical energy to open the door to the Demon King's great labyrinth. The memory sharply cuts to the real quest location. A harsh rocky wasteland, steam bursts everywhere from the ground, and everything instantly goes awry. Batsu shouts that Takumi is literally igniting, orders Sasha to immediately hit him with water and apply healing magic. Niruhachi takes control of the chaos and shouts at Riku, forget about protecting her and throw all his defense onto Takumi. Niruhachi shouts that the gap in levels is simply unreal. She says, Takumi will turn into ash just by standing next to that and Takumi replies that he knows this all too well. He admits he was so traumatized that for some time he couldn't cook over fire at all. The imperial hippopotamus suddenly moves, the ground rumbles with tremors as Niruhachi tries to break away from the monster and gain distance. She composes herself to unleash her ultimate deadly move and intercept the flow of battle, but the dragon first scorches with a giant fiery breath attack, wiping out everything around with pure insane power. Niruhachi instantly realizes that all is hopeless. She shouts that it's impossible and orders Takumi to escape and run away at any cost right now. She panics and calls Rick, relying on him to hold the defense and not let Takumi get hurt. So Rick abruptly enters the fight and activates his heavy defensive equipment, the Shield of 1,000 Layers, to block the explosion. The attack still broke through the shields, and Niruhachi shouts that it's over. Takumi is definitely dead this time. Returning to the present, Takumi tells Chloe that he actually doesn't remember what happened next, but understands that he survived because he is standing here. Rick decides that in this situation he absolutely has no choice left, so he holds his position and puts the shield under the devastating dragon flame attack up close, head-on. Niruhachi twitches in shock. He suddenly realizes that Rick really is wearing the legendary invincible armor Aegis. And Chloe starts calling his other gear like Thor's gauntlet and asks if he has the full set of magical artifacts. She explains that collecting even one is usually impossible, so she can't believe Rick is using 3 at once. Neglichachi notices he also has Hades' helmet, which erases presence. She thought it was just a myth until she saw it now. But she decides it doesn't matter how he got them when the armor starts to dim and disappear from his body. She says he's right, sincerely thanks him for protecting Takumi from that attack, and right then. Then Rick completely gives up and falls to the ground, looking like a burnt toast. Sasha wakes up rubbing his painful head, looks around and confused, asks what happened to Rick. Naruhachi tells himself that saving his friend is the only thing that truly matters, and Rick just mumbles a short agreed from the corner. The smoke disperses and everyone panics, asking where that huge fiery ball went and whether Rick really managed to stop it. But when the dust settles, there is just a round white ball on the ground, squeaking. It looks at them incessantly with empty eyes, tilts its head and sounds as if it doesn't understand what is happening here. So Takumi and Sasha immediately rushed inside to hug it, shouting that it is incredibly cute and fluffy. Rick watches them from the ground and notices. For some reason the creature is too attached to Takumi but completely ignores the rest. Naruhachi explains, the monster is actually the reincarnation of Kaiser Behemoth, so it hates her and everyone who tried to kill it. Mashina adds, because during the fight Takuma was the only one who showed no hostility, so it trusts only him, the only one. Takumi looked at the little one and decided, since they are friends now, he will give it a proper name. He suggests naming it Bihibu because it sounds cute, but someone advises treating it like emergency food and the poor thing completely panics. Rick suggests calling it cotton meat because it looks fluffy, and someone else agrees. Everyone essentially only thinks about eating it. Takumi ignores the remarks about food and decides, since it's just a baby, he will call it nothing other than Makion. Naruhachi watches them with a barely noticeable smile, noting, the creature really clings only to Takami. But Takumi immediately sharply retorts. He says she is thinking incorrectly and that she should stop pulling names like emergency food or caught meat. Then Chloe touches his shoulder and shows the child has disappeared, calmly asks if he even ate it afterwards. Takami completely loses it and shouts that he did not eat it. The little one is still alive and wriggling fully. Naruhachi says that when all this mess is finally resolved, she might visit someone she hasn't seen for a long time, and she keeps dragging the team on S-rank quests. Takumi says, while she is having fun, he almost dies every time. When the quests finally end, Takumi stays in the camp as the cook for the whole team, but Sasha offers to help him. He smiles and tells her that it's okay. She needs to rest because she is completely exhausted continuously healing his wounds. Takumi starts cooking in the tent and tells everyone, since he was useless during the fight, at least let him take on culinary duties. Chloe watches him work and says that it's obvious, he really likes it, and then asks why he stopped being a traveler if he likes this lifestyle. So this triggers a memory from the past from the great labyrinth of the mighty Demon King, where exactly his old party was on an investigative mission in an abandoned castle at the exact place where Alice was initially left. They reached the door of the Demon King's room. There stood a disgusting magical seal. It measured the strength of the one unlocking it and reflected it back to block them, but Takumi simply approached and opened the huge doors as if they were made of cardboard, and this completely shocked everyone. He explains that the trap did not work on him for a simple reason. His power level was literally 0, so the doors had nothing to reflect. With the doors open, a single beam of light sharply cut through the darkness of the gigantic room right in its center. Little young Alice was sitting there, all alone on the cold floor. Looking back, he still cannot understand why that strange boy was just sitting in such a dangerous place in the first place. Takumi continues the story. He says he rushed to save the girl and assures it was a truly touching scene. He explains at that time Alice still could not properly pronounce words, only strange horse moans. But Chloe immediately interrupts and corrects him. She says it was not nonsense, it was the language of demons. Takumi is completely confused by this information and asks her what exactly Alice was really saying then. So she reveals the truth. Alice was actually looking at him and asking if she could interrupt and destroy him. Today Takumi is completely losing his mind. He starts shouting at his past, run for your life. But Chloe tells him to calm down because he is not dead. In the memory, he reaches the girl. And she immediately flies at him with a strike. He whimpers in pain when she hits, but it doesn't stop him. He just laughs, says that children need to be a little rebellious, and catches her right there as if it's nothing. Then he puts on his best heroic face and tells her that she was probably lonely, and from now on he will protect her. Rick watches them leave, hiding in the shadows, and admits that he doesn't fully understand what happened, but is still glad they are okay. He mutters that strange things really do happen in this world. And he just stands there silently, quietly smiling from behind the helmet. Takumi notices that he is standing here all alone in the corridor, and asks Karn what exactly Rick is looking at. But Rick is focused on something completely different. He determines that Takumi is a demon lord with the body of an astral spirit, or suddenly it dawns on him. He goes crazy realizing that this is the same demon king who possessed Linden during the great tournament before this. He starts thinking it over again and again, wondering if the possession is happening right now or if it is just a residual echo. But he decides to postpone it, quietly muttering that he will see them another time. Returning to the story, Takumi says, as soon as he took Alice, his adventure turned into how he walks through the Demon King's castle, a blob pinned to his chest, and Alice sitting on his back. In the city, Chloe bursts out laughing and tells him that he looks exactly like an exhausted mom raising children. Takumi ignores her and asks the butcher for portions of pork. So Chloe continues to tease, mocking that this domestic routine suits him much better than any sword fights. Takumi recalls the old days and admits, life with Alice meant risking his own life every day. And he explains her power was simply too heavy to bear. She would destroy everything around, even anyone standing too close. One terrible moment, a giant boar monster charged their camp while they were just trying to relax. Alice rushed in swiftly and with one blow shattered the huge beast to dust. And the problem was that the debris flew in all directions, and Takumi almost died when he was covered by scattered rubble. Late that night while they were cooking by the fire, Takumi calls Alice and she returns to ask what he wants. He points to the cauldron full of meat and asks if she thinks she can eat the whole monster she just hunted, but Alice immediately cuts in, no way, and says that if she tries to eat all of it, she will just instantly become completely full. Takumi tells her, if she cannot eat it, then why kill it like that? It would have been enough just to scare it so that it ran away. He becomes serious and teaches her the most important rule. When someone takes a life, they must take responsibility for it, and she too. Alice looks at him intently for a moment, then nods and makes it clear that she understands what he means about responsibility. Immediately after this, Takumi folds his hands and prays aloud to the gods and spirits, thanking them for the day and Alice asks what he is doing. Takumi explains that he puts his gratitude for the food into words, so. Then he tells her that it is not necessary to say it out loud, it is enough for her to say these words silently in the depths of her heart. Alice tries, but Takumi admits, he never imagined that this advice would later cause a grand misunderstanding. Later, Alice is amazed. He caught a small rabbit and did not crush it, and even says that he is cool, so careful. Takuma gulps air convulsively. He understands the truth. He simply lacks the strength to kill it with one blow, even if he really wanted to. But Alice completely misinterprets this. She says that he is incredible for how he hid his strength and restrained himself so perfectly, even though he is stronger than her. She really learns restraint because of this, and Takumi begins to hope that she will be able to control her strength and live normally. And he watches her walk ahead and admits, back then he really thought everything would be that simple. Takumi is going home with a rabbit, completely not understanding what is happening, and thinks that he deceived her. After that, when Alice is in the pen, they start clearing S-class quests one after another. And 6 months pass as if nothing happened. Takumi looks like a walking corpse from that stress. Meanwhile, someone is knocking the cork out of a test tube to collect a sample from the field. Norohachi asks Takumi if he noticed. She saved a piece of the monster that Rick already defeated in the tube. Next, the group heads to the guild headquarters to check if there is any work. Link tells them that there are no S-class tasks, but offers AA1 in Chaos Valley. Norohachi are forced to accept. There is no choice. They accept it and ask who the target is, so Linden tells them to wait a second while she checks the file. And then she smiles and warns Takumi, Bahibu is literally eating his shirt right now. Tatsumi gets furious because Bahibu is literally eating the shirt right off his back. And he realizes the receptionist is actually Linden. She explains that she was sent here. So she pulls out a needle and orders him to undress. Takumi asks if they really have to do it here. And Nirakachi bursts in there and shouts that the reception should not be dealing with such personal services. Linden is still sewing while Takumi blushes, so Norohachi demands that she stop because she wants to do it herself. Linden finishes and returns the shirt, so Takumi thanks her for the quick fix. She instantly switches to work mode and targets the objective in Chaos Valley. And Norohachi asks if she has a crush on Takami. Linden just smiles and says to Takami, call her if he loses a button again. The group moves on, and Karna remembers that Takumi used to be very popular with the girls. Takumi denies this and claims that he is simply unreliable, so everyone starts behaving as if he needs a guardian. Takumi looks at the vision and immediately notices Rika is right here handing something to Linden, and Takumi understands it. That Rick and Linden had actually been working together as partners for over 10 years, hiding it from everyone. Yes. So he puts the pieces together. If Linden was already a demon king, then he has no idea who Rick really is. Karna looks at him with super bloodshot eyes and asks Takukun if he wants to stop watching these flashback memories right now. And she directly tells him that in this world, there are things that are probably better not to know. She says if Rick is planning some dirty scheme, they just need to pretend they saw nothing. Then she smiles and asks if he just wants to leave everyone and go somewhere with her, just the two of them. She wants to leave all this drama behind and live quietly somewhere where no one can bother her. Takumi lowers his gaze and says, that's impossible. He says he did exactly the same thing 10 years ago. But he knows the past cannot be undone. When he ran away, everything had already happened. And now it's time to pay for it. Memory takes him to a place called Chaos Valley there, where huge stone cliffs rise and where Lyndon steps forward and makes a loud statement. She appoints Rick as the official leader of their party. Takumi smiles and says Rick can count on him, but he has no idea he is talking to a traitor. And the armored one from their group begins to move forward into the narrow passage, while the others fall behind. He suddenly activates the skill shell release, and his armor begins to crack from the energy. Then right in front of him, out of nowhere, appears a huge chimera with a lion's head and a snake's tail. Turning back to the present, Karna watches the vision and says that this is definitely ancient magic used to create the chimera. Tatsumi begins to panic and says that he remembers this moment in detail. This is what attacked him. In the memories, the beast growls and rushes straight at him, claws ready. And Rick shouts, asks what the hell this thing is, completely shocked as if he never planned this at all. In the memories, Alice begins to panic. She says the intelligence was wrong and a monster of this type should not be here. So she screams and in despair, suddenly lunges forward to stop it. The chimera slams its paws on the ground so hard that the soil crushes right in front of them. Someone shouts, "It's still moving," and it withstood a direct hit from Alice as if nothing happened. And Tatsumi looks up in horror exactly at the moment when the beast's mouth, huge and looming, appears right above him. The chimera swings its claws with colossal force and completely crushes him. And then he is thrown and shaken through the air while Alice screams his name in terror. Turning back to the present, Tatsumi tells Karna that he is watching the memory but admits, there has always been one mystery in all of this. And he says that he still did not understand why that one strike from the chimera did not kill him instantly. Suddenly, a memory shows why a huge pillar of light explodes around Alice as soon as she lets out a wild scream. The descriptions say, Alice was completely overwhelmed by this colossal power. She cannot stop her own destructive impulses. The witch shouts at Takumi not to come closer, insisting that Alice is already doomed and too dangerous. But Takumi completely ignores the warning and forces his battered body to run straight into the energy explosion. The witch panics and shouts his name while he crouches, groaning in pain from previous injuries. But as soon as he looks up, Alice lets out a beastly roar and rushes at him with pure murderous rage, completely out of control. It is a duel between the strongest being and the weakest, and no one backs down. Then Takumi realizes, perhaps the only reason he was born is to stop Alice at this very moment. Alice throws a punch, but instead of hitting him, the fist softly and absolutely safely taps his chest. A quiet, safe thump. She instantly breaks free from rage and looks completely confused, while Takumi gently strokes her head. And she immediately panics, asks why he is bleeding so much and what happened to him. Takumi gently tells her that everything is fine now, so there is nothing more to fear. So Alice smiles broadly, fully recovered, and admits, Takumi is incredible. Even at full power, she cannot defeat him. She hugs him tightly and joyfully declares that he is truly the strongest guy in the entire universe. Takumi looks badly beaten, but he only responds with a smile, saying that she understood everything well, and she is really right. The same words echo for a moment in the darkness, exactly what he just said, and then Rick reveals that was his slogan from 10 years ago. Takami freezes. This is stranger than the fact that Rick is actually a villain. Karna starts to panic, shouting that Takun is literally dying from his wounds and asks if he is okay. Takumi ignores the pain and suddenly realizes he always found it strange that he lived to this moment. Usually, he would have died long ago. He finally guesses. Rick has been using an invisible shield all this time to reduce the damage he receives. Time stops the air, and Takami and Karna also freeze in shock, realizing this whole setup started somewhere back then long ago. Karna is completely confused, but Takumi figured it out, using Alice's misunderstanding to make him the strongest. That was the plan from the very beginning. Rick stands among the ruins and calmly confirms that Takumi hit exactly right. He is absolutely correct about the scenario. Takumi just silently stares at him, completely shattered, confused, and words won't come out. He stammers, trying to process what his enemy is saying. Rick declares that his ultimate goal is to turn Takumi into the king of the world, and then put an end to everything. The end, Takumi notices one more thing. The memory he just saw was not accidental. Rick deliberately showed him this flash. And Rick admits that he did not plan for the demon's sword to follow, but Karna sharply cuts in. She holds on to Taka under any circumstances. Takumi takes a step forward and asks the main question. Why bother causing all this fuss just to make a weak boy like him strong? Rick says their king must be the one who understands true pain. Essentially, it has to be the weakest person left alive. He continues his speech, stating that this particular weak human somewhere needs to be stronger than all of them, and Rick grabs his face and shows. The physical body has long since rotted, so it turns out that Takumi himself must take the helm. Takumi completely loses control when he sees the rot, and screams at the top of his lungs how terrible it is. He screams non-stop that Rick is completely headless, there is nothing inside him, and that the empty armor scares him to madness. Rick tries to get a word in to explain himself, stammering a little on the way. But Takumi cuts him off mid-word and steps back, shouting that he should put on a helmet already, because a talking neck stump is way too creepy. The Flash confuses Rick. He quickly agrees and frantically tries to put the helmet back on as soon as possible. When he calms down, Takumi tells Rick that making him king will change nothing. He literally can't do anything and refuses to do anything. Rick just nods and agrees, acknowledging that Takumi really spends all his time lounging around and doing nothing. So he explains, being the king of misunderstandings is normal and Alice will take the title of the strongest. Rick spread his arms to the sides and declared that this result is the only thing he couldn't achieve in thousands of years. And he stands there in full armor, strangely already with braids pigtails, and calls it the perfect world. Takumi just stands there all sweaty, completely confused, and asks what the hell Rick means by perfect world. He realizes that Rick is serious and calls it disgusting. Thinking about it for thousands of years is really scary. Takumi says that he can never become the king of something so shameful. And Rick tells him that it doesn't matter what he wants. The misunderstandings have already become self-sustaining and won't stop. He doubles down on the drama and declares that Takumi will rule this world forever. Yet Takumi abruptly cuts him off. He pointed a finger and looked terrified of something, so. Then he tells Rick to shut up and look behind. Rick freezes and makes a confused sound. Takumi's face lights up, and he shouts, "Bihihu," as soon as he realizes that this little dummy is right here. The little creature responds to him with a cute sound, acknowledging Takumi and simply. As soon as Alisa slides into the frame, Takumi immediately tries to give Riku away to her.